Struggling single mom apologized for bringing her paralyzed son on a blind date. But the CEO just smiled and said, but as Maya drove home, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. The black sedan that had been behind them for the last 6 blocks, staying exactly 3 car lengths back. The way it had appeared right after they'd left the school, like it had been waiting. Have you ever felt watched? Like someone was waiting for you to be happy, just so they could tear it down? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The entire restaurant fell silent when she walked in. Not because she was late, but because she brought her truth with her, and some truths are too powerful to ignore. Maya pushed through the heavy glass doors of Meridian, Atlanta's most exclusive dining spot, her hands gripping the handles of Jordan's wheelchair, so tight her knuckles went white. The hostess looked up from her reservation book, eyes widening as she took in the sight. A young black woman in a department store dress, wheeling her 9-year-old son past tables filled with men in $1,000 suits and women dripping in diamonds. Every conversation stopped. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Wine glasses froze mid-sip. The soft jazz playing overhead suddenly felt too loud, too intrusive, like a soundtrack to her humiliation. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to turn around, to run back to her beat-up Honda in the parking lot and pretend this whole blind date idea had never happened. But Jordan looked up at her with those bright eyes that had seen too much pain for someone so young, and whispered, "Mom, the lights look like stars." She squared her shoulders and kept walking. The hostess recovered first, plastering on that practice smile that said, "I'm paid to be polite, but I wish you weren't here. Can I help you?" "I'm meeting someone," Maya said, her voice steadier than she felt. Nathaniel Cross. The name changed everything. The hostess's fake smile became real, her posture straightened, and suddenly Maya wasn't an intrusion. She was a VIP guest who just happened to arrive differently than expected. "Of course. Right this way, Miss Davis." Maya Davis. They weaved through the maze of white tablecloths and crystal stemware. Maya caught fragments of whispered conversations as they passed. Asterisk, is he coming over? Maya looked at her son in the rearview mirror. This brave, brilliant boy who'd learned not to get too excited about adult promises because they had a habit of disappearing. "Yeah, baby. He's coming over tomorrow night." Jordan's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? He's coming to our house." "Really?" But as Maya drove home, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. The black sedan that had been behind them for the last 6 blocks, staying exactly 3 car lengths back. The way it had appeared right after they'd left the school, like it had been waiting. She turned left at the next intersection. The sedan turned left. She turned right at the following block. The sedan turned right. Maya's heart started a race, but not with the giddy excitement she'd felt reading Nathaniel's text. This was the cold, sharp fear of a mother who'd learned to trust her instincts about danger. She made 2 more turns, taking a deliberately roundabout route to their apartment building. The sedan stayed with them, maintaining the precise distance, never getting close enough for Maya to see the driver's face. When she finally pulled into their parking lot, the sedan drove past without slowing down. But Maya caught a glimpse of the license plate in her side mirror. New York tags on a car that had no business in their neighborhood. "Mom?" Jordan's voice was smaller now, picking up on her tension. "Is everything okay?" Maya forced a smile, looking back at her son. "Everything's fine, baby. Just thought I saw someone I knew." But as she helped Jordan out of the car and into his wheelchair, Maya couldn't help glancing over her shoulder. The street looked normal. Kids playing on stoops, neighbors chatting on front steps, the usual rhythm of their neighborhood. Still, something felt different, like the safety she'd worked so hard to build around her, and Jordan had developed a crack she couldn't see but could definitely feel. Inside their apartment, Jordan immediately went to his art table, pulling out fresh paper with the focused intensity he reserved for his most important projects. "I'm going to draw Mr. Nathaniel a special space dragon," he announced. "One that protects families." Maya watched her son work, his small hands moving confidently across the page, and tried to shake the lingering unease from the car ride. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe the sedan had just been going in the same direction. Maybe the feeling of being watched was just her own anxiety manifesting because happiness felt too fragile to trust. But as Jordan drew his protective space dragon, Maya made a mental note to start paying more attention to the cars behind them, the faces in crowds, the feeling that their small, carefully constructed world might not be as safe as she believed. Because if there was one thing 3 years of single motherhood had taught her, it was this. When something seemed too good to be true, there was usually someone waiting in the shadows to prove it. Have you ever felt watched? Like someone was waiting for you to be happy, just so they could tear it down? Share your experience below if you've ever had that creeping feeling that your joy was being monitored by someone who didn't wish you well. Some men see obstacles where others see opportunities. But Nathaniel saw something in Jordan's eyes that reminded him why he'd forgotten how to trust his own heart. The appetizer plates had been cleared, and the conversation flowed easier than Maya had expected. Nathaniel asked Jordan about school, about his drawings, about his favorite movies. Not the careful, talking to a child questions that made Jordan roll his eyes, but real questions that treated him like his opinions mattered. So space dragons, Nathaniel said, cutting into his steak. What gave you that idea? Jordan launched into an elaborate explanation involving NASA documentaries and a Dragon Tales rerun, his hands moving animatedly as he spoke. Maya found herself relaxing for the first time all evening, watching her son be himself without apology or explanation. That's brilliant, Nathaniel said when Jordan finished. You know, I have a friend who worked for SpaceX. Maybe I could arrange for you to visit sometime, see some real spaceships. Maya's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Oh, you don't have to. Mom, Jordan interrupted, eyes wide. Really? Real spaceships? Nathaniel nodded. Really real. No friendly dragons, but pretty impressive engineering. Maya felt that familiar tightness in her chest, the one that came whenever someone offered something that seemed too good to be true. Because in her experience, it usually was. That's very kind, she said carefully, but Jordan understands that sometimes adult promises are more like nice thoughts. Something shifted in Nathaniel's expression. He set down his fork and looked directly at Maya, his gray eyes serious. I don't make promises I can't keep, he said quietly, especially not to children. The weight behind those words made Maya look at him more carefully. There was something there, something that explained why a successful CEO was spending his Friday night having dinner with a single mother and her disabled son instead of at whatever exclusive event he could have attended. Jordan, Nathaniel said, turning back to her son, can I ask you something? Jordan nodded, mouth full of mac and cheese. When you draw your space dragons, are they ever scared? Jordan swallowed, considering the question seriously. Sometimes, when they have to fly through asteroid fields or when they meet new planets. But they fly anyway because someone needs help. That's what I thought. Nathaniel's voice dropped to something softer, more personal. You know what I see when I look at you? Maya held her breath. She'd heard this before. The inspiration speeches, the "you're so brave" comments that meant well, but made Jordan feel like a museum exhibit instead of a kid. I see strength, Nathaniel said. Real strength. The kind that doesn't come from walking. It comes from refusing to let anything stop you from living. From flying through asteroid fields even when you're scared. Jordan beamed. Maya felt her eyes water. My little brother was like you, Nathaniel continued, and Maya's breath caught. He was born with spina bifida. Couldn't walk, but man, could he fly. In his mind, in his dreams, in the stories he told. He was the bravest person I ever knew. The past tense wasn't lost on Maya. Died when he was 12. Complications from surgery. Nathaniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. But before he did, he made me promise something. He made me promise that whenever I met someone like him, someone who flew even when they were scared, I'd help them soar higher. The restaurant noise faded to background static. Maya stared at this man who'd just revealed something so personal, so painful, that it recontextualized everything about this evening. That's why you're here, she said, understanding flooding through her. That's why you said yes to this blind date. No, Nathaniel's eyes found hers and held them. I'm here because Sarah convinced me I needed to meet someone who would challenge me. Someone who would remind me what real strength looks like. He glanced at Jordan, then back at Maya. She was right, but not for the reason she thought. Maya's pulse quickened. What do you mean? I came here expecting to have dinner with an attractive woman and politely end the evening with some excuse about work. Instead, I'm sitting here with two people who've reminded me what courage actually means. Jordan had gone quiet, listening with the intensity children reserve for conversations they sense are important even if they don't understand all the words. Can I ask you something now? Maya said. Nathaniel nodded. Why did you really pull out that third chair? Why didn't you do what most men would do? Suggest we go somewhere more appropriate for children. Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment, his fingers absently turning his water glass. When he looked up, his honesty was so raw it made Maya's chest ache. Because I spent 10 years watching people look at my brother like he was a problem to be managed instead of a person to be celebrated. I watched him learn to make himself smaller so other people would be more comfortable. I watched him apologize for existing in spaces where he belonged just as much as anyone else. He reached across the table and, without asking permission, covered Maya's hand with his own. The touch was warm, steady, electric. I pulled out that chair because Jordan belongs wherever his mother goes. Because you're a package deal, and any man who can't see that isn't worthy of either of you. Maya stared down at their joined hands, his pale fingers against her dark skin, his expensive watch catching the light, his thumb unconsciously stroking across her knuckles. She should pull away. She should protect herself from whatever this was, because men like Nathaniel Cross didn't really want women like her. They dated socialites and heiresses, women who fit into their world without requiring adjustments or accommodations. But his touch felt like safety, like coming home to a place she'd never been. Besides, Nathaniel said, his voice dropping to something that made her skin warm despite the restaurant's aggressive air conditioning. I like the way you look when you're not apologizing for taking up space. When you're not trying to make yourself smaller for other people's comfort. Maya's breath caught. How do I look? Magnificent. The word hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they were brave enough to cross. Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks, felt her pulse kick up another notch, felt something she hadn't experienced in so long she'd almost forgotten what it was. Desire. Not just physical attraction, but the deeper hunger for connection, for being seen and wanted exactly as she was. Mom, Jordan's voice cut through the tension. Are you okay? Your face is all red. Maya laughed, the sound slightly breathless. I'm fine, baby. But she wasn't fine. She was terrified and exhilarated and completely out of her depth with this man who looked at her son and saw strength instead of limitation, who touched her hand like she was something precious instead of someone desperate. Nathaniel's thumb was still moving across her knuckles, and Maya realized he was doing it unconsciously, like his body had decided it belonged there without consulting his brain. When was the last time someone surprised you by seeing past your circumstances to your character? Maya found herself asking the restaurant full of people who were definitely still watching their table. Drop a comment if you've experienced that rare moment of being truly seen. As if summoned by her words, Maya's phone buzzed against the table. She glanced at the screen and felt her world tilt sideways. Insurance denial. Claim number 47829. Jordan Davis Physical Therapy Services. The blood drained from her face so quickly Nathaniel immediately leaned forward. What is it? Maya stared at the notification, her mind calculating and recalculating numbers that never worked no matter how she arranged them. Jordan's therapy. The experimental treatment his doctors wanted to try. The bills that were already drowning her. She looked up at Nathaniel, this kind, generous man who'd just revealed his own pain, who was holding her hand like she mattered, and felt the familiar weight of reality crushing her chest. I'm sorry, she said, already pulling her hand away, already reaching for her purse. I need to make a call. I should probably go. Maya, wait. But before she could gather her things, before she could make excuses and apologies and retreat back into the safety of struggle, Nathaniel did something that stopped her cold. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper that somehow managed to be both gentle and commanding. Whatever that notification says, whatever problem just landed in your lap, you don't have to face it alone. Maya's eyes filled with tears she couldn't let fall. Not here, not in front of all these people who were already questioning what she was doing in their world. You don't understand, she whispered back. You don't know what you're saying. Then tell me. 2 words. Simple, direct, loaded with a promise that scared her more than any threat ever could. Because Nathaniel Cross was offering her something she'd learned not to accept from anyone. Help without strings, support without judgment, partnership instead of charity. As she looked into his gray eyes, Maya realized she was standing at a crossroads she'd never expected to reach. Behind her lay years of fierce independence, of handling everything alone, of teaching Jordan that they could only count on each other. Ahead lay something she'd stopped believing existed, a man who saw her whole truth and wasn't running away. The question was she brave enough to stop running too? When was the last time someone surprised you by seeing past your circumstances to your character? Drop a heart in the comments if you've experienced that moment when someone saw your worth before you believed it yourself. She'd spent 3 years refusing charity, until the night a stranger offered something that wasn't pity, wasn't guilt, but something far more dangerous, genuine care. Maya's hands trembled as she opened the insurance notification fully. The words blurred together, claim denied, coverage limitations, appeal process. But the number at the bottom was crystal clear, $8,400 in therapy costs that her insurance had just decided weren't medically necessary. Jordan had fallen asleep against her shoulder, exhausted from the excitement of the evening, his small body warm and trusting against her side. The restaurant had thinned out, the dinner rush giving way to late-night couples sharing desserts and whispered conversations. But at their table, silence stretched like a hell breath. How much? Nathaniel asked quietly. Maya looked up from her phone. I'm sorry. The bill. How much do you need? The question was so direct, so matter-of-fact, that Maya almost answered before her defenses slammed back into place. I can't, she started. You can't what? Accept help? Let someone care about what happens to Jordan. Nathaniel's voice was gentle but firm. Maya, I watched you carry the weight of this whole evening on your shoulders. You apologize for being late, for bringing Jordan, for existing in a space where you had every right to be. When you get to just be taken care of, Maya felt tears threaten again. You don't understand. People don't just help without wanting something back. There's always a price. What if there isn't? The question hung between them like a challenge. Maya studied Nathaniel's face, searching for the catch, the angle, the moment when his kindness would reveal its true cost. Everyone wants something, she said finally. You're right. Nathaniel's admission surprised her. I do want something. Maya's stomach dropped. Here it was, the moment when the fairy tale cracked and reality bled through. I want Jordan to get the therapy he needs, Nathaniel continued. I want you to stop carrying the world on your shoulders alone. I want to see what happens when you're not fighting for basic survival every single day. He leaned forward, his eyes intense in the dim restaurant lighting. And yes, if I'm being completely honest, I want to take you on a real date. One where you're not worried about money or judgment or whether you belong. One where you can just be yourself. Maya stared at him. You want to date me? I want to get to know you. The real you. The woman who raised an incredible kid while working 2 jobs. The woman who walked into this restaurant knowing she'd be judged and did it anyway because she believed in possibility. And the fact that I come with complications? With a son who needs expensive therapy and a life that's nothing like yours. Maya. Nathaniel's voice was soft but certain. Jordan isn't a complication. He's part of what makes you extraordinary. Before Maya could respond, he was reaching into his jacket pocket, pulling out his phone. His fingers moved quickly across the screen. What are you doing? Making a call. He held up one finger as someone answered. Rebecca? It's Nathaniel. I need you to set up a payment for medical services. Yes, tonight. Maya's eyes widened. Nathaniel, no. But he was already giving details. The therapy center's name, Jordan's information that Maya had mentioned during dinner, the exact amount from her insurance denial. Stop, Maya said, reaching for his phone. You can't just. Done, Nathaniel said, ending the call. He looked at Maya with satisfaction that was somehow both proud and gentle. Jordan's therapy is covered for the next 6 months. The payment will process tonight. The restaurant spun around Maya. She gripped the edge of the table, feeling like she was falling through space. What? The word came out as barely a whisper. Because this isn't about money, Nathaniel said simply. This is about what's right. And what's right is making sure that boy gets every chance to live the life he deserves. But I can't pay you back. Not for months, maybe not for years. Did I ask you to pay me back? Maya opened her mouth, then closed it. He hadn't. No terms, no interest rates, no timeline for repayment. This isn't charity, Nathaniel continued, as if reading her thoughts. This is investment. I'm investing in Jordan's future, in your peace of mind, in the possibility that maybe, just maybe, you'll let me stick around long enough to see what happens when you're not drowning. Maya felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, wind whipping around her, knowing that her next step would either save her or destroy everything she'd built. I don't understand you, she said finally. Good. Nathaniel's smile was soft, genuine. I'd be worried if this was easy for you to accept. The fact that you're fighting it tells me everything I need to know about your character. Jordan stirred against Maya's shoulder, blinking sleepily. Are we going home now? Maya looked down at her son, then at Nathaniel, then at her phone where a notification was already appearing, payment confirmation from the therapy center. Yeah, baby, she said, her voice thick with emotion she couldn't name. We're going home. As they gathered their things, Maya felt the weight of every eye in the restaurant still on them. But for the first time all evening, she realized she didn't care what they thought. Let them stare. Let them whisper. Let them try to make sense of why a man like Nathaniel Cross would choose to spend his evening with a woman like her. She was starting to wonder the same thing herself. In the parking lot, Nathaniel insisted on helping get Jordan settled in Maya's car. He crouched beside the passenger seat, making sure Jordan's seatbelt was secure, talking quietly about space dragons and SpaceX visits that might or might not happen. Thank you for dinner, Jordan said sleepily, and for the therapy money. Mom cries sometimes when she thinks I can't see her because of the bills. Maybe she won't cry as much now. Maya's breath caught. Nathaniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Your mom is the strongest person I know, Nathaniel said seriously. Those tears, they're not weakness. They're love. She cries because she loves you so much she'd do anything to help you. Even fight with insurance companies and work extra shifts and go on blind dates with strangers. Jordan nodded solemnly. She's the best mom ever. I think you're right. Maya stood beside her car, keys in hand, not sure how to end this evening that had turned her entire world upside down. How do you say goodbye to someone who just changed your life? How do you thank someone for seeing you as worth saving? Maya, Nathaniel said, straightening up from Jordan's seat. She looked up at him. This man who was too good to be real, too kind to be trusted, too generous to exist in her world of careful calculations and guarded hope. What's the difference between charity and compassion? She found herself asking the night air, addressing the questions swirling in her own mind as much as any invisible audience. Between pity and recognition? Tell me in the comments what you think. I know what I think, Nathaniel said quietly, stepping closer. Maya's pulse kicked up as his proximity registered. The warmth of his body, the clean scent of his cologne, the way he looked at her like she was something precious. What do you think? I think charity is about the giver feeling better about themselves. Compassion is about seeing someone's worth and wanting to honor it. He was close enough now that Maya had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Close enough that she could see the sincerity there, the heat, the question he wasn't quite brave enough to ask. Which one was tonight? She whispered, You tell me. Maya studied his face in the parking lot lights, the strong jaw, the gray eyes that seemed to see straight through her defenses, the mouth that had spoken more kindness in one evening than she'd heard in 3 years. I think, she said slowly, Tonight was the first time someone looked at my life and saw possibility instead of problems. Good answer. They stood there for a moment longer, the space between them charged with potential, with promises neither was ready to make, with the recognition that something significant had shifted between them. Finally, Maya stepped back. I should get Jordan home. Of course. Nathaniel moved away, giving her space, but his eyes never left her face. Maya, yeah, this doesn't end here. Tonight, I mean, if you're willing. It wasn't a question, but it wasn't a demand either. It was an invitation, a door left open, a choice he was placing entirely in her hands. Maya looked at him, really looked, and realized she was standing at the intersection of everything she'd been and everything she might become. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I can ask. As Maya drove away, Jordan already asleep in the passenger seat, she caught sight of Nathaniel in her rearview mirror. He stood beside his sleek car, hands in his pockets, watching her taillights disappear into Atlanta traffic. For the first time in 3 years, Maya allowed herself to wonder, what if? What if he meant everything he'd said? What if there really were no strings attached? What if someone like Nathaniel Cross could genuinely want someone like her, not despite her complications, but including them? The text arrived as she was helping Jordan into his wheelchair in their apartment building's parking lot. Thank you for tonight, for letting me meet Jordan, for being exactly who you are. And Maya stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Thank you for seeing us. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, I'd like to meet her. Maya's breath caught. Meet who? The woman who exists when she's not apologizing for taking up space. The phone trembled in Maya's hands. 3 words that shouldn't have made her heart race, shouldn't have kept her awake staring at the ceiling long after Jordan was asleep. After all, this wasn't about her. It couldn't be, could it? What's the difference between charity and respect? Between pity and compassion? Share your thoughts below about what it means when someone sees your struggle as strength instead of weakness. Every fairy tale has someone watching from the darkness, and theirs was no exception. Marcus Devlin stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan office, phone pressed to his ear, watching the city lights twinkle 40 stories below. At 52, he'd built his empire through patience, precision, and an almost supernatural ability to find people's weak spots and exploit them. Tonight, he found Nathaniel Cross's. You're certain it was him? Marcus asked, though he'd already seen the photos his investigator had sent. Nathaniel Cross, CEO of Cross Industries, crouched beside a child's wheelchair in an Atlanta restaurant. Nathaniel holding hands with a black woman who clearly didn't belong in his world. Nathaniel paying for dinner with a smile that Marcus hadn't seen on his former business partner's face in 5 years. Positive, sir. Sources at Meridian confirm he covered the entire evening, plus made some kind of phone call that got the kids' medical bills paid. Marcus smiled, the expression cold even in the reflection of the dark glass. Medical bills? The boy's disabled. Paralyzed, from what I can tell. Single mother, works 2 jobs, struggling financially. Perfect. Marcus ended the call and walked to his desk, where photographs were spread across the polished surface like cards in a game only he knew how to play. Maya Davis leaving her apartment building at dawn, heading to her first job. Maya picking up Jordan from school, his wheelchair folded in the back of her beat-up Honda. Maya crying in her car outside the therapy center when she thought no one was watching. And Nathaniel walking into her world like he had any idea what he was getting himself into. 5 years ago, Nathaniel had cost Marcus everything that mattered. Not just money, though the failed merger had cost Marcus his company and most of his fortune. Not just reputation, though being publicly outsmarted by someone 10 years younger had made him a joke in business circles that had once feared his name. No, Nathaniel had cost him something far more valuable, the woman Marcus had planned to marry. Elena had left him the day the merger fell through, claiming she couldn't be with someone who'd been so thoroughly defeated by a better man. She married a tech entrepreneur 6 months later, someone younger, richer, and more successful than Marcus could ever be again. Since then, Marcus had rebuilt his empire slowly, carefully, waiting for the right moment to return the favor. waiting for Nathaniel to give him something precious enough to destroy. And now he had. Marcus picked up the photo of Maya laughing at something Jordan had said, her face bright with the kind of joy that came from small, perfect moments. Beautiful, obviously devoted to her son, clearly struggling but maintaining her dignity despite the circumstances. Exactly the type of woman Nathaniel would fall for. Exactly the type of weapon Marcus could use. His phone buzzed with a text from his investigator. Found the ex-husband, David Davis. Disappeared after the accident. Located in Miami, recently clean, working construction. Appears to be having financial difficulties. Marcus's smile widened. This was almost too easy. Meanwhile, 300 miles south, Maya was learning that happiness could be more terrifying than despair. The therapy center had called that morning to confirm Jordan's payment and schedule additional sessions. The receptionist's voice had been warm, professional, free of the careful pity that usually colored conversations about Jordan's treatment. Mr. Cross's office provided authorization for the full treatment plan Dr. Martinez recommended, she'd said. We can start the intensive program next week if that works for your schedule. Maya had hung up the phone and sat in her empty apartment for 20 minutes, trying to process the reality that her son's future had been fundamentally altered by one dinner with a man she barely knew. Now, as she picked up Jordan from school, watching him wheel himself toward her car with a kind of speed and enthusiasm that meant he'd had a good day, Maya felt that familiar tightness in her chest. Not anxiety this time, but something much more dangerous, hope. Mom! Jordan called as she helped him transfer from his chair to the passenger seat. Guess what happened today? What happened, baby? Mrs. Rodriguez said I could enter my space dragon drawing in the district art contest. And Tommy Parker said my wheelchair looks cool, and he asked if I could teach him how to do wheelies. Maya folded Jordan's wheelchair into the back of the Honda, her heart swelling with pride and possibility. That's wonderful, Jordan. I'm so proud of you. Do you think Mr. Nathaniel would want to see my contest drawing? The question made Maya's hands still on the car door. Since their dinner 3 days ago, Jordan had mentioned Nathaniel approximately 50 times. Mr. Nathaniel said space dragons are brave. Mr. Nathaniel has a friend at SpaceX. Do you think Mr. Nathaniel likes pizza? Maya had been asking herself different questions. Why hasn't he called? Was dinner just a one-time kindness? Did he wake up the next morning and realize what he'd gotten himself into? I don't know, baby, Maya said honestly. Mr. Nathaniel is a very busy man. But he said he wanted to see my drawings. He promised. I don't make promises I can't keep. Especially not to children. Maya remembered Nathaniel's words from dinner, the weight behind them, the suggestion of old pain that made such promises sacred. But people said a lot of things in restaurants over expensive wine and romantic lighting. Reality had a way of making charity feel less appealing in the harsh light of day. Her phone buzzed as she started the car. A text from an unknown number. Imaya, this is Nathaniel. I hope it's okay that I got your number from Sarah. I was wondering if you and Jordan would like to have dinner tomorrow night. Somewhere Jordan can show me more of his artwork. And Maya stared at the message so long that Jordan asked if she was okay. Yeah, she said, but her voice came out breathless. Yeah, I'm fine. She read the message again. No mention of fancy restaurants or expensive gestures. Just dinner and an invitation for Jordan to share his art. That would be nice, she typed back. What did you have in mind? The response came almost immediately. Your place? I could bring pizza. Jordan mentioned he likes pizza. Maya's pulse kicked up. Her apartment. Her small, modest space with second-hand furniture and Jordan's artwork covering every available surface. The place where she couldn't hide behind expensive restaurants or perfect lighting, where Nathaniel would see exactly how she lived. The place where, if he was going to run, he'd have every reason to do so. Okay, she typed. Tomorrow at 6? Perfect. Can't wait to see those space dragons. Maya set her phone down, aware that Jordan was watching her with the kind of careful attention children develop when they've learned to read their parents' moods for signs of danger. Was that him? Jordan asked quietly. Yeah, is. She'd given up on perfect moments until he showed up at her door with pizza and the kind of smile that made her remember what hope felt like. Maya had cleaned her apartment 3 times. She'd rearranged Jordan's artwork on the refrigerator, hidden the stack of bills behind the coffee maker, and changed clothes twice before settling on jeans and a sweater that said casual but put together, instead of trying too hard to impress the millionaire. At 5:58 p.m., she was pacing her small living room like a caged animal, second-guessing everything from the scented candle she'd lit, too romantic, to the music playing softly in the background, too obvious, to the decision to invite a man she barely knew into the space where she and Jordan felt safest. Jordan, meanwhile, sat at his art table putting finishing touches on what he declared his masterpiece, a space dragon with silver scales and kind eyes, wings spread wide in protection over a small family standing beneath. "He's gonna love it, Mom," Jordan said for the 10th time, holding up his drawing. "Look, the dragon has your hair." Maya looked closer and realized Jordan was right. The dragon's mane flowed in dark waves exactly like hers. "That's beautiful, baby." The knock on the door made her jump. "He's here," Jordan announced, spinning his wheelchair toward the entrance with an excitement that made Maya's chest tight with hope and terror in equal measure. Maya opened the door and felt her breath catch. Nathaniel stood in her hallway holding 2 pizza boxes and wearing jeans and a simple gray sweater that somehow made him look more attractive than his expensive suit had. He traded his polished CEO appearance for something softer, more approachable, more real. "Hi," he said, and his smile was warm enough to melt her anxiety. "Yourself." Maya stepped back to let him in, hyper-aware of how small her apartment must seem to someone accustomed to penthouses and luxury. "You found us okay? GPS is a wonderful thing." Nathaniel stepped inside, and instead of looking around with the polite but obvious judgment Maya had been dreading, he focused entirely on Jordan. "I brought reinforcements," he said, holding up the pizza boxes. "Cheese for the artist, and Supreme for the grown-ups who can handle more complicated flavors." Jordan giggled. "I can handle complicated flavors. I eat mushrooms sometimes." "Mushrooms are very sophisticated," Nathaniel said seriously. "Almost as sophisticated as space dragons." He looked around Maya's living room then, taking in the mismatched furniture she'd bought piece by piece from thrift stores, the walls covered with Jordan's artwork, the photos documenting their small family's journey through struggle and joy. Maya held her breath, waiting for the moment when reality would hit, when he'd realize the enormous gap between their worlds, when the charm of helping the struggling single mother would wear off in the face of her actual life. Instead, Nathaniel smiled wider. "This is perfect," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made Maya's eyes water. "It feels like home." Jordan beamed. "Want to see my new drawing? I made it special for you." "I would be honored." Maya watched Nathaniel crouch beside Jordan's wheelchair, giving the drawing the same serious attention he'd probably given million-dollar contracts. His reaction when Jordan explained the protective dragon, eyes widening with genuine amazement, questions that showed he was really listening, made something warm and dangerous bloom in Maya's chest. "This is incredible, Jordan. Look at the detail in the scales and the way the dragon's wings curve to shelter the family. You're a real artist." "Mom says I get it from my dad," Jordan said matter-of-factly, "but I don't remember him much." Maya's stomach clenched. They'd never discussed Jordan's father with Nathaniel, never addressed the complications of her past or the reasons a 9-year-old boy might not remember the man who'd helped create him. But Nathaniel didn't ask the obvious questions. Instead, he said, "Well, wherever the talent comes from, we're doing something special with it." They ate pizza on Maya's small couch, Jordan between them as he had been at the restaurant, chattering about school and his friends and the contest Mrs. Rodriguez had encouraged him to enter. Maya found herself relaxing despite her earlier nerves, drawn into the easy rhythm of conversation, the way Nathaniel made space for both of them in every topic. "So," Nathaniel said as Jordan finished his second slice, "your mom tells me you're interested in real spaceships, not just the dragon variety." Jordan's eyes lit up. "Did you really mean it about visiting your friend at SpaceX?" "I really meant it. In fact, I made some calls today." Nathaniel pulled out his phone, showing Jordan photos that made the boy gasp. "My friend Marcus. Maya's blood ran cold. Marcus. Marcus Chun, Nathaniel clarified, and Maya's relief was so intense she felt dizzy. Not Marcus Devlin, the name that had been haunting her thoughts since her research into Nathaniel's business history had turned up articles about their failed partnership. He's a propulsion engineer, builds rocket engines. He said if you're really interested in space travel, he'd love to show you around the facility. Jordan was practically vibrating with excitement, but Maya found herself studying Nathaniel's face, looking for signs that this was another too-good-to-be-true promise that would evaporate under the weight of real life. "You don't have to do that," she said carefully. "I know you're busy, and Jordan understands that sometimes adult schedules." "Maya." Nathaniel's voice was gentle but firm. He turned to face her fully, his gray eyes serious. "Can I ask you something?" She nodded. "What would it take for you to believe that I'm here because I want to be? Not because I feel sorry for you. Not because I'm trying to prove something to myself. Not because this is some elaborate charity project. Because I genuinely enjoy spending time with you and Jordan." The question hung in the air between them, loaded with more vulnerability than Maya had expected. Around them, her small apartment felt warm and safe, filled with the comfortable sounds of Jordan describing his latest space dragon designs and the soft jazz still playing from her ancient stereo. "I don't know," Maya admitted quietly. "I've spent 3 years learning that if something seems too good to be true, it usually is. People don't just show up and want to help. Not without wanting something in return." "What do you think I want in return?" Maya looked at him, really looked, at the way he'd positioned himself on her couch so Jordan could easily reach him, at how he'd listened to her son's stories with genuine interest instead of polite patience, at the careful way he'd navigated questions about Jordan's father without pushing for information she wasn't ready to share. "I don't know," she said again. "That's what scares me." Nathaniel reached across the couch, his fingers brushing hers where they rested on the cushion between them. The touch was light, questioning, easily escaped if she wanted to pull away. Maya didn't pull away. "What if," Nathaniel said quietly, "what I want is just this? Dinner with people who make me laugh. Conversations that matter. The chance to be part of something real instead of just successful." His thumb traced across her knuckles, and Maya felt that electric awareness she'd experienced at the restaurant, that recognition of attraction that went deeper than physical chemistry. "Jordan," Nathaniel said, turning back to her son without releasing Maya's hand, "would it be okay if I asked your mom on a proper date? Just the two of us?" Jordan considered this seriously. "Where would you go?" "Somewhere she can be herself without worrying about anything else. Maybe a place where she can laugh without looking over her shoulder to see if anyone's judging her for taking up space." Maya's breath caught. He'd been watching, noticing, understanding her discomfort in ways she hadn't realized. "And you bring her home safe?" Jordan asked with the gravity of someone much older than 9. "I'd bring her home safe," Nathaniel promised. Jordan looked at Maya. "I think you should go, Mom. You never go anywhere fun." Before Maya could respond, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. The caller ID made her stomach drop. "I need to take this," she said, pulling her hand away from Nathaniel's warmth. "Jordan, why don't you show Mr. Nathaniel your other drawings?" Maya stepped into the kitchen, her pulse hammering as she answered the call she'd been dreading for 3 years. "Hello, David." Maya. Her ex-husband's voice was exactly as she remembered. Smooth, charming, completely unreliable. "You look good. Both of you do." Maya's blood turned to ice. "What do you mean, both of us?" "I've been watching, following your progress. Jordan's gotten so big. He looks happy. Where are you?" Maya's voice came out as a whisper. "Close enough. Maya, we need to talk. There are things you don't understand, things about Jordan's future that we need to discuss." Maya gripped the phone tighter. "You gave up any right to discuss Jordan's future when you walked out of the hospital and never came back. I was young. I was scared. I made mistakes." David's voice took on the pleading tone she remembered from their worst fights. "But I'm different now. I'm clean. I have a job. I've got my life together. And I want my son back." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She leaned against the kitchen counter, fighting waves of nausea and panic. "You can't just." "I can, Maya. I've been talking to lawyers. I have rights. Parental rights that don't disappear just because I needed time to figure things out. Through the doorway, Maya could see Nathaniel and Jordan looking at artwork together, their heads bent close in concentration, Jordan's face bright with the attention he craved from a father figure. The perfect picture of what their life could be, which David was about to destroy. "Don't do this," Maya whispered into the phone. "Please. He's happy. He's stable. He has therapy. He has friends. He has a life that works. He has a life that could be better. With both his parents. With financial security. With opportunities you can't give him." Maya closed her eyes, recognizing the manipulation tactics she'd hoped never to hear again. "This isn't about Jordan. This is about control. About proving you can still disrupt my life whenever you want to. This is about family, Maya. About giving our son the father he deserves. He deserves a father who doesn't abandon him when things get difficult. People change. I've changed. And whether you like it or not, I'm his father. I'm coming back, Maya. The only question is whether you're going to make this easy or hard." The line went dead. Maya stood in her kitchen, phone trembling in her hand, listening to the sound of Jordan's laughter mixing with Nathaniel's deeper voice from the living room. The happiness that had felt so fragile, so new, so possible just minutes ago, now felt like a soap bubble about to burst. "Maya." Nathaniel appeared in the kitchen doorway, concern creasing his features. "Everything okay?" She looked at him, this kind, generous man who'd stumbled into their lives at exactly the wrong moment, who'd made them both believe in possibilities that were about to be ripped away. "Yeah," she lied, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack her face. "Everything's fine." But as Nathaniel studied her face with those perceptive gray eyes, Maya realized her world was about to turn upside down. And the man who'd just asked her on a proper date, who'd made her son believe in protective space dragons and SpaceX visits, was about to discover that some fairy tales come with villains who refuse to stay in the past where they belong. When did you know someone was becoming more than just a possibility? That moment when maybe becomes what if? Tell me about it in the comments below. Some men destroy what they can't have, and Marcus Devlin had perfected the art of patient revenge. 40 stories above Manhattan, Marcus Devlin spread photographs across his glass conference table like a general planning war. Maya Davis at her first job, cleaning office buildings before dawn. Maya at her second job, serving lunch at a downtown deli. Maya crying in her car outside Jordan's therapy center, head buried in her hands while her son waited inside. "Beautiful work, Richardson," Marcus said to the private investigator sitting across from him. "How long have you been following them?" 2 weeks, sir. Since you identified the target." Richardson, a thin man with forgettable features and expensive equipment, slid another folder across the table. The ex-husband was easier to locate than expected. David Davis, currently residing in Miami. Construction worker, recently clean from a cocaine addiction, struggling to make rent. Marcus picked up David's photograph. A handsome man whose eyes held the hollow look of someone who'd burned every bridge he'd ever crossed. Perfect. Financial situation? Desperate. Lost his apartment last month, staying in a weekly motel. Behind on child support by 3 years, approximately $40,000. And his relationship with the boy? Non-existent since the accident. Abandoned them both when the medical bills started piling up. But here's the interesting part. Richardson leaned forward. "I've been monitoring his communications. He's been researching family lawyers, looking up custody rights, asking questions about parental visitation." Marcus's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Someone's already been in his ear." "My thoughts exactly. The timing is too convenient. Someone else is pulling strings." Marcus stood and walked to his windows, looking out at the city lights that had once felt like his kingdom, before Nathaniel Cross had taken everything that mattered. 5 years of careful planning, of rebuilding his fortune one strategic move at a time, all leading to this moment. What about Cross's involvement with the woman? Deeper than expected. He's not just playing charity case. He covered the kids' therapy bills, spent 3 hours at their apartment last night, left looking like a man who'd found something precious. The words hit Marcus exactly where he'd hoped they would. Nathaniel Cross, the golden boy who'd never lost anything that mattered, had finally given Marcus a target worth destroying. "Contact David Davis," Marcus said quietly. "Offer him $50,000 and the best family lawyer in Georgia. Tell him it's time to reclaim his son." Richardson nodded, making notes. "What's the endgame?" Marcus turned back to the photographs, studying Maya's face in the image where she was laughing at something Jordan had said. Beautiful, clearly devoted, completely unaware that her world was about to become a battlefield. "Nathaniel cost me my business and my fiancée. He took everything I built and left me to rebuild from nothing." Marcus picked up the photo of Maya and Nathaniel holding hands across the restaurant table. "Now I'm going to return the favor. I'm going to give him something precious, let him fall completely, and then destroy it so thoroughly he'll understand exactly what I lost." "And the woman? The kid?" Marcus set down the photograph. "Acceptable casualties." 300 miles south, Maya was learning that some phone calls could destroy a perfect evening faster than a tornado could level a house. She stood in her kitchen, gripping the counter so hard her knuckles went white, trying to process David's words. "I want my son back. I've been talking to lawyers. I have rights." Through the doorway, she could hear Nathaniel and Jordan discussing the finer points of rocket propulsion, Jordan's excited voice mixing with Nathaniel's patient explanations. The sound of her son being treated like his questions mattered, like his dreams were worth taking seriously. Everything David had never been able to give him. "Maya," Nathaniel appeared in the kitchen doorway, concern written across his features. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Something like that. Maya forced herself to straighten up, to pull her protective walls back into place. "Sorry, work emergency." She could see in his eyes that he didn't believe her, but Nathaniel was too much of a gentleman to push. Instead, he moved closer, his presence warm and steady in her small kitchen. "Want to talk about it?" The offer was tempting, more tempting than it should have been. Maya had spent 3 years handling every crisis alone, making every decision without consultation, carrying every burden without help. The idea of sharing this weight with someone else, even for a moment, was almost overwhelming. But this wasn't his problem. Jordan wasn't his son, and David's return would complicate everything in ways that would send most men running for the exits. "It's handled," she said, the lie bitter on her tongue. Nathaniel studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, but Maya, yeah, whatever it is, you don't have to face it alone. Not anymore." The words were gentle, offered without pressure or expectation, but they hit Maya like a physical blow. Because she did have to face it alone. She always had to face everything alone. That was the reality of single motherhood, of being the only adult responsible for a child who needed more care than most. "I should get Jordan ready for bed," she said, stepping around Nathaniel toward the living room. But as she moved past him, Nathaniel's hand caught hers, warm fingers wrapping around her wrist with careful pressure. "Maya." She looked up at him, and something in his gray eyes made her breath catch. Heat, yes, but also something deeper. Recognition, understanding. The look of someone who saw through her defenses to the fear underneath. "Whatever's scaring you right now," he said quietly, "it doesn't change anything between us. It doesn't make me want to run. It just makes me want to stay closer." Maya stared at him, memorizing his face, the sincerity in his expression, the way he looked at her like she was something worth fighting for. Because tomorrow, or next week, or whenever David made his move, Nathaniel was going to discover that being close to her meant being close to complications that could destroy his reputation, his business, his carefully ordered life. And then he would run. They always did. "Jordan," she called, pulling her hand free of Nathaniel's gentle grip. "Time to get ready for bed." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of normal bedtime routines made strange by Nathaniel's presence. He helped clear the pizza boxes, complimented Maya's coffee, listened to Jordan's detailed explanation of his bedtime ritual with the kind of attention that made her son glow with importance. "Will you come back soon?" Jordan asked as Nathaniel prepared to leave. "If your mom says it's okay." Jordan looked at Maya with hopeful eyes that made her chest ache. "Can he, Mom? Can he come back?" Maya glanced at Nathaniel, standing in her small living room like he belonged there, like he was part of their family instead of a visitor from another world entirely. "We'll see, baby." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't no either. Jordan seemed satisfied with the non-answer, hugging Nathaniel goodnight with the easy affection of a child who'd been starved for positive male attention. At the door, Nathaniel paused, his hand on the knob. "That date," he said quietly, so Jordan wouldn't overhear from his bedroom. "Are you going to think about it?" Maya looked at him, really looked, tried to memorize this moment before everything changed. Before David's return turned her life into a legal battlefield. Before Nathaniel realized that caring about her meant stepping into a war he hadn't signed up for. "Yeah," she said, "I'll think about it." But as Nathaniel's footsteps faded down the hallway, Maya was already thinking about something else entirely. She was thinking about lawyers and custody battles and how to protect Jordan from a father who'd abandoned him once and might do it again. She was thinking about how to explain to a 9-year-old boy that the man he'd started to trust as a father figure might disappear the moment things got complicated. Most of all, she was thinking about how quickly happiness could turn to terror when someone from your past decided your present was too good to last. Maya locked the door behind Nathaniel, checked it twice, then pulled out her phone to do research she should have done 3 years ago. Research about parental rights, about custody laws, about how to fight a battle she'd never imagined having to fight. Outside her apartment building, a black sedan idled in the shadows between streetlights. Inside, Richardson raised a camera with a telephoto lens, capturing images of Nathaniel Cross leaving Maya Davis's building at 9:47 p.m., looking like a man who'd found something worth protecting. The photographs would be on Marcus Devlin's desk by morning, along with a full report and David Davis's flight information. The war for Jordan's future was about to begin, and Maya had no idea she was already surrounded. Have you ever had someone dig into your past to hurt your present? How did you handle someone trying to use your pain against you? Share your experience below. She'd forgotten what it felt like to be courted, until the night he showed her that some men see a woman's strength as her most beautiful feature. The Atlanta Botanical Garden, after closing time, was a different world entirely. Paths lit by thousands of tiny white lights, the conservatory glowing like a crystal palace against the night sky, the scent of jasmine and roses floating on the warm evening breeze. Maya stood at the entrance, wearing a sundress she'd bought 3 years ago for a job interview and never had occasion to wear since, feeling like she'd stepped into someone else's fairy tale. "How did you manage this?" she asked Nathaniel, who was pushing Jordan's wheelchair along the accessible path, both of them pointing out interesting plants and sculptures along the way. "I made some calls," Nathaniel said with the casual tone of someone who regularly made calls that resulted in private access to public venues. "Jordan mentioned he'd never seen the tropical conservatory, and I thought it might be nice to explore without crowds." Jordan's wheelchair was decorated with small solar lights that Nathaniel had attached to the spokes, turning the medical equipment into something magical. Maya watched her son point excitedly at orchids and butterflies, his face bright with wonder, and felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. This was what normal felt like. This was what it meant to be courted not as a single woman, but as a package deal with full acknowledgement that she came with complications and responsibilities that couldn't be left at home. "Mom, look." Jordan called from beside a fountain shaped like a fairy ring. The water changes colors. Maya joined them, watching the fountain cycle through blues and greens and purples, Jordan's reflection dancing in the shifting light. When she looked up, Nathaniel was watching her instead of the water display. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You're beautiful when you're not worried about something." The compliment was simple, direct, completely sincere. Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks, felt that electric awareness that had been building between them since their first dinner. "I'm always worried about something," she said. "Comes with the territory." "I know." Nathaniel moved closer, his voice dropping to something that made her skin warm despite the evening breeze. "That's what makes moments like this so precious." They walked deeper into the garden, Jordan leading the way with the confidence of someone who'd never met a place he couldn't explore. The accessible paths wound through different themed areas, rose gardens and herb spirals, a children's section with plants that responded to touch, benches placed at perfect intervals for rest and conversation. Can we go in there? Jordan asked, pointing toward the tropical conservatory that rose like a glass cathedral at the garden's heart. Inside, the air was thick and warm, filled with the sounds of hidden waterfalls and the flutter of wings. Exotic plants reached toward the glass ceiling, their leaves so green they seemed to glow. Butterflies moved like living flowers through shafts of filtered light. Jordan positioned his wheelchair beside a bench where Maya and Nathaniel could sit while he sketched the scene around them. His art supplies had become a constant companion, and Maya had learned to pack them for every outing, every appointment, every moment when her son might find inspiration. "He's incredible," Nathaniel said quietly, watching Jordan work with focused intensity. "The way he sees the world, the way he processes beauty and turns it into something new." Maya followed Nathaniel's gaze to her son, seeing Jordan through his eyes. Not as a child limited by his wheelchair, but as an artist discovering his voice, a young man with gifts that had nothing to do with his ability to walk. "He is incredible," she agreed. "Sometimes I think the accident that took his legs also gave him something else. A different way of seeing, maybe a deeper appreciation for things other kids take for granted." "Like what?" Maya considered the question, watching Jordan add careful details to his drawing of a butterfly perched on an orchid stem. "Like patience, like finding joy in small moments, like understanding that strength doesn't always look the way people expect it to." When she looked back at Nathaniel, his expression was soft, contemplative, touched with something that might have been sadness. "Your brother," Maya said gently. "What was he like?" Nathaniel was quiet for so long that Maya thought he might not answer. Then he began speaking, his voice low and careful, like he was handling something fragile. "Michael was 3 years younger than me. Born fighting, the doctor said. Surgery after surgery. Therapy sessions that left him exhausted but never defeated." Nathaniel's hands were clasped in his lap, knuckles white with tension. He used to say his wheelchair wasn't a limitation. It was his spaceship, his race car, his escape pod. Depending on the day. Maya's throat tightened. "He sounds wonderful. He was everything good about being human, concentrated into this small, fierce, unstoppable person." Nathaniel looked at Jordan, who was now adding stars to the ceiling of his drawing. The surgery that killed him was supposed to give him more mobility. He was so excited about the possibility of walking, even if it was just a few steps. He died believing his life was about to get better. "I'm sorry," Maya said, and meant it completely. "I've spent 10 years wondering if I pushed him toward that surgery. If my need to fix him somehow contributed to losing him." Maya turned on the bench to face Nathaniel fully, seeing the guilt he'd been carrying, understanding suddenly why her acceptance of his help had been so important to him. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "When Jordan was first injured, I spent months researching every possible treatment, every experimental therapy, every chance for him to walk again. I was so focused on getting his legs back that I almost missed who he was becoming without them." Nathaniel's eyes found hers, gray and serious in the conservatory's filtered light. "One day, I found him crying in his room. Not because of the pain, not because of the wheelchair, but because he thought I was disappointed in him. He thought he was failing me by not getting better faster, by not being the son I wanted him to be." Maya's voice caught, remembering that awful moment of realization. "That's when I understood that my job wasn't to fix him. My job was to love him exactly as he was, to help him discover what his life could be instead of mourning what it couldn't be." "And you think that's what Michael needed?" "I think Michael needed exactly what you gave him. Someone who saw his worth beyond his limitations, someone who celebrated his victories without minimizing his struggles." Maya reached over and covered Nathaniel's clasped hands with one of her own. "Your brother didn't die because you loved him too much. He died knowing he was completely, unconditionally loved. That's the greatest gift any child can receive." Nathaniel's hands relaxed under hers, his breathing deeper, some tension she hadn't realized he was carrying finally releasing. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For understanding. For not making me feel guilty about the guilt. Maya smiled, her thumb stroking across his knuckles in a gesture that was becoming natural, comfortable, right. We make a good team, don't we? Two people who've learned that love means accepting the whole person, complications, and all. Is that what this is? Nathaniel asked, his voice taking on a different quality, something warmer and more intimate. Love. Maya's breath caught. They were moving into territory they hadn't named yet, feelings that had been building since their first dinner but hadn't been spoken aloud. I don't know, she said honestly. I've been afraid to call it that. Why? Because love makes you vulnerable. It gives other people the power to hurt you in ways you never expected. As if summoned by her words, Maya's phone buzzed in her purse. She ignored it, focusing on Nathaniel's face, on the way he was looking at her like she was the most important thing in his world. The phone buzzed again. You should check that, Nathaniel said gently. Maya reluctantly pulled out her phone, her stomach dropping when she saw the caller ID. Jordan's school. Hello, Ms. Davis? This is Principal Morrison. I'm calling because we had an incident today involving Jordan and another parent. Maya's blood went cold. What kind of incident? A man came to the school this afternoon claiming to be Jordan's father. He had identification, said he was here to pick up his son. When we explained our pickup authorization procedures, he became aggressive. Maya's hands started shaking. Across from her, Nathaniel went very still, obviously picking up on her distress. What did you do? We followed protocol. No one is authorized to pick up Jordan except you and the emergency contacts you provided. But Ms. Davis, this man was very insistent. He claimed he had legal rights, mentioned lawyers, said he'd be back with proper documentation. Maya closed her eyes, feeling the perfect evening cracking apart around her. Thank you for calling. Thank you for protecting him. Of course, but I think you should know. You seem to know quite a bit about Jordan's schedule, his therapy appointments, his routines. This wasn't a random attempt. Someone's been watching. The call ended, leaving Maya staring at her phone while her world tilted sideways. Maya, Nathaniel's voice seemed to come from far away. What's wrong? She looked at him. This kind, generous man who'd given her son the most magical evening of his young life, who'd shared his deepest pain and fears, who'd made her believe in possibilities she'd thought were beyond her reach. Jordan's father, she said, her voice barely a whisper. He's back. What's the most thoughtful thing someone has done that showed they truly saw you, all of you? Share your story below if you've ever had someone love your complications instead of despite them. Some ghosts return not to haunt you, but to steal what you finally built from the ashes they left behind. The Starbucks on Peachtree Street was neutral territory. Public enough to feel safe, busy enough that David couldn't make a scene without drawing attention. Maya had chosen it carefully, the same strategic thinking that had kept her and Jordan safe for 3 years of building their life without him. She arrived 15 minutes early, claiming a corner table where she could watch the door and all the exits. Her hands shook as she stirred her coffee, the same nervous energy that had kept her awake for 3 nights since David's call. Nathaniel had offered to come with her, had insisted, actually with a protective intensity that made something warm and dangerous bloom in Maya's chest. But this conversation needed to happen alone, without complications that David could use against her later. Besides, she'd spent 3 years handling everything solo. She could handle one more confrontation with a man who taught her that love could disappear the moment it became inconvenient. David walked through the door at exactly 2 p.m., and Maya's breath caught despite herself. He looked good, clean, healthy, wearing clothes that fit properly and shoes that weren't falling apart. His dark hair was trimmed, his jawline sharp without the bloat that alcohol and drugs had given him during their final months together. This was the David she'd fallen in love with at 22, before she'd learned that charm and good looks could mask a character that crumbled under pressure. Maya. He slid into the chair across from her, his smile warm and familiar and completely fake. You look beautiful. Motherhood suits you. Don't. Maya's voice was sharp enough to cut. We're not doing the small talk thing. Say what you came to say. David's smile faltered for a moment, revealing a flash of the petulance that had always emerged when he didn't get his way immediately. Straight to business. I can respect that. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with eyes that had once made her feel cherished and now made her skin crawl. I want to see Jordan. No, he's my son, Maya. I have rights. You had rights. You gave them up when you walked out of that hospital room and never looked back. Maya kept her voice level despite the rage building in her chest. You gave them up when you stopped calling, stopped visiting, stopped sending support checks. I was dealing with my own problems. We were all dealing with problems. Maya's voice rose slightly before she caught herself, lowering it back to something that wouldn't carry to other tables. Jordan was learning to live without the use of his legs. I was learning how to be a single mother to a disabled child while working 2 jobs to pay medical bills. You were dealing with problems? We were drowning, and you chose to save yourself first. David had the grace to look ashamed, but Maya had learned not to trust his expressions. He'd always been good at performing remorse when it served his purposes. I know I made mistakes. You didn't make mistakes. You made choices. Every day, for 3 years, you chose not to call your son, not to ask how he was doing, not to send birthday cards or Christmas presents or child support checks. Those weren't mistakes, David. That was abandonment. People change, Maya. I'm clean now. I have a job. I'm in therapy. I'm not the same man who left. Maya studied his face, looking for signs of the addict she'd lived with for 2 years. The bloodshot eyes, the nervous energy, the way he'd scratch at his arms when he was coming down. She didn't see them, which should have been reassuring, but somehow made her more suspicious. How long, she asked. How long what? How long have you been clean? 18 months. Maya did the math quickly. Jordan had been injured 3.5 years ago. David had left 4 months later, claiming he couldn't handle the stress, the medical bills, the reality of son who would never walk again. So you got clean 1.5 years after you abandoned us. Congratulations. Do you want a medal? David's jaw tightened. I'm trying to make things right. You can't make this right. You can't just reappear after 3 years and expect everything to go back to the way it was. Jordan doesn't even remember you anymore. That hit home. Maya saw the flinch, the moment of genuine pain that cracked David's composed facade. Then help me, he said, leaning forward with desperate sincerity. Help me get to know him again. Help me be the father he deserves. He already has everything he deserves. Stability, security, people who show up for him every single day. He doesn't need someone who might disappear again the moment things get difficult. I'm not going to disappear. You did before. That was different, was it? Or are you going to tell me that watching your son learn to live without his legs was somehow more stressful than dealing with insurance companies, physical therapy schedules, adaptive equipment, accessibility modifications, and working 60 hours a week to keep the lights on? David was quiet for a long moment, and Maya wondered if she'd finally gotten through to him, finally made him understand the magnitude of what he'd walked away from. Then he smiled, and Maya's blood ran cold. You're doing better now, though, he said conversationally. I hear you're dating someone. Wealthy businessman, drives a nice car, pays for Jordan's therapy. Maya went very still. How do you know that? I've been keeping tabs, making sure my son is being well cared for. David's tone was light, almost casual, but Maya caught the thread underneath. Nathaniel Cross, right? Cross Industries. Impressive resume. Old money family, real estate empire, very respected in business circles. Stay away from him. I'm not interested in him, Maya. I'm interested in Jordan. But it does make me wonder, what does a man like that want with a woman like you? The question hit like a slap. Maya felt her face burn with anger and something deeper. The old insecurities David had always been expert at triggering. What's that supposed to mean? Just that men like Nathaniel Cross don't usually date struggling single mothers from the wrong side of Atlanta. Makes me wonder what story you told him, what image you're projecting that might not be entirely accurate. Maya's hands clenched into fists under the table. Get to the point, David. The point is that your new boyfriend might feel differently about playing house with you and Jordan if he knew the whole truth about why Jordan ended up in that wheelchair. The coffee shop noise faded to background static. Maya stared at David, feeling the blood drain from her face, feeling the familiar weight of guilt and responsibility she'd carried for 3.5 years. You bastard. I'm not trying to hurt you, Maya. I'm trying to protect our son. What happens to Jordan when Nathaniel gets bored? When a novelty wears off? When he realizes that raising a disabled kid is harder than writing checks for therapy? He's not like that. They're all like that. Rich men don't commit to women like you, Maya. They play house for a while. They feel good about themselves for helping the less fortunate. And then they move on to someone from their own world. Maya stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor loud enough to draw stares from nearby tables. This conversation is over. Maya, wait. David reached across the table, grabbing her wrist with fingers that were stronger than she'd expected. I'm not the enemy here. I want what's best for Jordan. Let go of me. I have legal rights. I've been talking to lawyers, good ones. They tell me that courts favor reuniting children with biological parents, especially when the custodial parent's living situation is unstable. Maya jerked her wrist free, David's fingers leaving red marks on her skin. My living situation isn't unstable. Isn't it? 2 jobs, dependent on government assistance. Now, dependent on charity from a man you barely know. What happens when he decides you're more trouble than you're worth? Maya wanted to argue, wanted to defend Nathaniel's character, wanted to insist that what they had was real and lasting and worth fighting for. Instead, she heard herself saying the words that had been haunting her since that first dinner. He won't. But even she could hear the doubt in her own voice. David heard it too. His smile returned, predatory and satisfied. I'll be in touch, Maya. Give Jordan my love. As David walked away, Maya sank back in her chair, her legs suddenly too weak to support her. Around her, the coffee shop continued its normal rhythm. Conversations and laughter, keyboards clicking, the hiss of the espresso machine. But Maya felt like she was drowning. Because David was right about one thing. She was completely dependent on Nathaniel's generosity for Jordan's medical care. If he disappeared tomorrow, she'd be right back where she started. Working 2 jobs, fighting with insurance companies, watching her son suffer because she couldn't afford the treatment he needed. And David knew about the accident, about her role in what had happened to Jordan, about the secret she'd never told Nathaniel, the guilt she carried every day, the reason she'd never felt worthy of the kind of love Nathaniel seemed to offer. Maya pulled out her phone with shaking hands and typed a text to Nathaniel. Can we talk? Something's happened. His response came immediately. On my way. Whatever it is, we'll handle it together. But as Maya sat in that coffee shop, waiting for a man who might not want to handle anything with her once he knew the truth, she wondered if some ghost from the past were too powerful for even the strongest love to overcome. Outside, David climbed into a rental car and made a phone call. It's done, he said when the familiar voice answered. She's scared, she's shaken, and she knows I'm serious about the custody fight. Good, Marcus Devlin replied from his Manhattan office. Phase 1 is complete. Now we move to Phase 2. What's Phase 2? We make Nathaniel Cross choose between his reputation and his feelings. And we make sure he chooses wrong. How do you handle someone from your past trying to disrupt your present happiness? What would you do in Maya's situation when faced with someone who knows your deepest vulnerabilities? She'd fought for her son's life once. Now she had to fight for her right to be his mother. The law office of Patterson, Wells & Associates occupied the top floor of a downtown Atlanta high-rise, all glass and steel and intimidating leather furniture that cost more than Maya's car. She sat in the waiting room, hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white, trying not to think about how much this consultation was going to cost. Nathaniel sat beside her, his presence solid and reassuring despite the tension radiating from both of them. He'd insisted on coming, on paying for the lawyer, on being part of whatever battle David was about to wage. You don't have to do this, Maya said for the 10th time since they'd arrived. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. Nathaniel's voice was quiet but absolute. The moment David threatened Jordan, it became my fight too. Maya looked at him, this man who'd walked in her life 6 weeks ago and somehow become her anchor in every storm, and felt that familiar mixture of gratitude and terror. Because David was right about one thing. Men like Nathaniel didn't usually sign up for custody battles with ex-husbands and complicated legal drama. Ms. Davis, a woman in an expensive suit, appeared in the doorway. "I am Jennifer Patterson. Please come in." Patterson's office was designed to intimidate, with its wall of law books and panoramic view of Atlanta's skyline. But the woman herself was warm, professional, with kind eyes that seemed to genuinely care about Maya's situation. "I've reviewed the preliminary information you provided," Patterson said, settling behind her desk with a thick folder. "David Davis filed for emergency custody 3 days ago, claiming you're an unfit parent due to unstable living conditions and exposure to inappropriate relationships." Maya felt sick. Inappropriate relationships? He's arguing that Jordan is being exposed to strangers, specifically mentioning Mr. Cross's involvement in your lives. Patterson glanced at Nathaniel. "He's painting it as a pattern of poor judgment on your part." "That's ridiculous," Nathaniel said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I've known Jordan for 6 weeks. Every interaction has been supervised, appropriate, and focused on his well-being. I understand that, Mr. Cross, and you're welcome to provide character testimony if needed. But David's legal team is building a narrative about Maya's dependence on temporary relationships for financial stability." Maya closed her eyes, feeling the trap closing around her. "What are my options?" "Legally, David does have parental rights that weren't terminated when he left. The court will likely order supervised visitation to start, with the possibility of expanded custody depending on how Jordan responds." "He doesn't even remember his father," Maya said desperately. "David walked out when Jordan was 6 years old, right after the accident. Jordan was in the hospital, learning to use a wheelchair, processing trauma, and his father just vanished." Patterson made notes, her expression sympathetic but realistic. "That works in your favor for primary custody, but courts generally believe children benefit from relationships with both biological parents when possible." Maya felt like she was falling through space. Everything she'd built, everything she'd fought for, everything she'd sacrificed to give Jordan stability and security. All of it could be destroyed by a man who'd contributed nothing to their lives for 3 years. "There's something else," Patterson continued gently. "David's legal team is quite expensive. Top-tier family law firm, known for high-profile custody cases. Do you know how he's affording representation like that?" Maya shook her head, but a cold suspicion was forming in her mind. David had been living in a weekly motel, struggling to make rent. Suddenly, he had money for lawyers who charged $1,000 an hour. "Someone's helping him," Nathaniel said, voicing Maya's thoughts. "Someone with resources and motivation." Patterson nodded. "My investigator is looking into it. If we can prove third-party interference, it strengthens your case significantly." "How long do we have?" Maya asked. "Emergency custody hearing is scheduled for next week. After that, if David gets supervised visitation, we're looking at a longer process to determine permanent arrangements." Maya felt tears threaten, the weight of impending loss making it hard to breathe. Jordan didn't understand what was happening, didn't know that his world might be about to change forever. How do you explain to a 9-year-old that the father who abandoned him now wants him back? "Maya." Nathaniel's hand found hers, warm and steady and absolutely certain. "Look at me." She met his gray eyes, seeing determination there, seeing someone ready to fight beside her instead of walking away when things got complicated. "We're going to win this," he said simply. "Whatever it takes, however long it takes, we're going to protect Jordan." "You don't understand what you're signing up for," Maya said, her voice breaking slightly. "Custody battles are ugly. They're going to dig into everything. My finances, my relationships, my history. They're going to try to make me look unfit, unstable, dependent. Let them try." Nathaniel's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. "They'll find a woman who's worked 2 jobs for 3 years to support her son, who's attended every therapy session, every doctor's appointment, every school conference, who's raised an incredible kid with grace and strength that most people couldn't manage with 10 times her resources." Patterson watched this exchange with professional interest. "Mr. Cross, I should warn you that your involvement will likely intensify their scrutiny. They'll argue that Maya is using you for financial gain, but the relationship is transactional rather than genuine. Then we prove them wrong, Nathaniel said without hesitation. Maya stared at him, this man who was choosing to stand beside her when any rational person would run. David was right about one thing. Wealthy men didn't usually sign up for custody battles with ex-husbands. They found easier relationships, women without complications, situations that didn't threaten their reputations or peace of mind. But Nathaniel wasn't any wealthy man. He was looking at her like she was worth fighting for, like Jordan was worth protecting, like their small family was something precious instead of problematic. There's more, Patterson said gently. David's team is requesting a psychological evaluation for Jordan, claiming the child has been traumatized by the father's absence and needs professional assessment of his attachment patterns. Maya felt her world tilt. They want to put Jordan through psychological testing? It's standard in contested custody cases involving young children. The evaluator will assess Jordan's emotional state, his relationships with both parents, his adjustment to current living arrangements. He's 9 years old, Maya whispered. He's been through enough trauma. I know. And we'll make sure the evaluator understands Jordan's history, his needs, his current stability. Patterson leaned forward, her voice becoming more personal. Maya, I've been doing family law for 15 years. I've seen cases like this before. Absent parents who return when life becomes convenient for them. The courts are getting better at recognizing these patterns, but we need to be prepared for a fight. As they left the law office an hour later, Maya felt like she was walking through quicksand. Everything solid in her life suddenly felt unstable, threatened by a man who contributed nothing to Jordan's well-being but still held the power to destroy it. Ice cream, Nathaniel said as they reached his car. Maya looked at him. What? Jordan gets out of school in an hour. We're going to pick him up, get ice cream, and tell him what's happening in terms he can understand. Together. The word together hit Maya like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had shared the burden of a difficult conversation with Jordan? When was the last time she hadn't had to be the only adult making the hard decisions? You don't have to, Maya. Nathaniel stopped walking and turned to face her fully. How many times are you going to try to push me away before you accept that I'm not leaving? This is different. This is messy and complicated and I'm still not leaving. He stepped closer, his hands finding her shoulders, his gray eyes intense with something that made her breath catch. Do you want to know what I think about when I'm lying awake at night? Maya's pulse kicked up. What? I think about Jordan showing me his drawings. I think about you laughing at something ridiculous he said. I think about how it feels when you look at me like I'm someone worth trusting. Nathaniel's thumbs traced small circles on her shoulders. I think about what it would be like to come home to you both every day, to be the person Jordan runs to with good news, to be the man you turn to when things get difficult. Maya stared at him, hardly daring to breathe. I think about building something real with you, Maya. Something that lasts. Something that makes both of us better than we were apart. Before Maya could respond, before she could process the magnitude of what he was saying, Nathaniel's phone rang. He ignored it. It rang again. You should answer it, Maya said, though she didn't want this moment to end. Nathaniel glanced at the screen, his expression shifting to concern. It's Jordan's school. Maya's stomach dropped as Nathaniel answered the call on speaker. Mr. Cross? This is Principal Morrison. I'm calling because we have a situation with Jordan. A man claiming to be his father showed up again, this time with legal documents. He's demanding immediate access to his son. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. Where's Jordan? Safe in my office. But Mr. Davis has a court order for supervised visitation, effective immediately. He's brought a social worker and is insisting on his rights. We're on our way, Nathaniel said, ending the call. As they raced through Atlanta traffic, Maya's mind spun with panic and strategy. This was happening too fast, before she was ready, before Jordan was prepared. He planned this, she said, gripping the door handle as Nathaniel took a corner faster than was probably legal. David planned this timing specifically to catch us off guard. Probably. But Maya, look at me. She turned to face him, seeing determination in his expression that matched her own protective fury. Jordan is not going anywhere he doesn't want to go. Not today, not ever. Whatever David's legal rights say on paper, our job is to protect that boy's emotional well-being first. The court order can be challenged, can be appealed, can be fought every step of the way if necessary. Nathaniel's jaw was set in lines Maya had never seen before. I have lawyers too, Maya. Good ones. And unlike David's mysterious benefactor, I'm not hiding my motivations. They pulled into the school parking lot to find a cluster of cars. David's rental, a social worker state vehicle, and a black sedan Maya didn't recognize, but that made her skin crawl with familiarity. The car that was following us, she said suddenly. David's not working alone. Nathaniel followed her gaze to the sedan, his expression darkening. No, he's not. But whoever's pulling his strings just made a mistake. What kind of mistake? Nathaniel's smile was sharp, predatory, nothing like the gentle expressions Maya was used to seeing. They involve my family. Jordan is mine to protect now, Maya. And I protect what's mine. As they walked toward the school entrance, Maya felt something shift inside her chest. Not just fear for Jordan's safety, not just anger at David's manipulation, but something fiercer and more powerful. For the first time in 3 years, she wasn't facing a crisis alone. For the first time since Jordan's accident, someone else was willing to fight just as hard as she was to protect her son. The question was whether their combined strength would be enough to defeat an enemy they still couldn't see clearly, an enemy with resources and patience and the kind of cruelty that used children as weapons in adult wars. Inside the school, Jordan sat in Principal Morrison's office, his wheelchair positioned close to the window, his sketch pad open on his lap. But instead of drawing space dragons or rocket ships, he was sketching 2 figures holding hands, a woman and a man standing protectively beside a smaller figure in a wheelchair. The family he'd been hoping for, drawn in careful lines and filled with all the colors of trust and love and the desperate hope that some good things were strong enough to survive the storms that tried to destroy them. When crisis hits a new relationship, do you think it strengthens the bond or breaks it? What's been your experience when outside forces try to tear apart something you were building with someone you cared about? Power isn't just about money. It's about knowing which stones to overturn to find the snakes hiding underneath. The conference room across industries looked like a war room by midnight. Laptops open, files scattered across the mahogany table, phones charging in every available outlet. Maya sat beside Nathaniel, watching him coordinate what looked like a small army of investigators, lawyers, and analysts, all working to uncover the truth behind David's sudden legal assault. Jordan was asleep on the leather couch in Nathaniel's office, wrapped in a blanket Maya kept in her car, exhausted from the day's emotional chaos. The supervised visit had lasted exactly 20 minutes before Jordan had asked to go home, David's stilted attempts at conversation falling flat against 3 years of absence. Richardson investigations, Nathaniel was saying into his phone, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made people drop everything and pay attention. I need everything you have on David Davis, financial records, employment history, travel patterns for the last 6 months. And I need it by morning. Maya watched him work, coordinating resources she couldn't have imagined having access to, calling in favors from people whose names she recognized for business magazines. This was Nathaniel in his element, strategic, focused, absolutely relentless when protecting something he cared about. The money trail is the key, said Jennifer Patterson, who joined them despite the late hour. David's legal team costs more than he's made in the last 5 years combined. Someone is bankrolling this custody fight, and we need to know who. What about the court order? Maya asked, her voice hoarse from hours of stress. Can we challenge the supervised visitation? Already filed an emergency motion, Patterson replied, not looking up from her laptop. I'm arguing that David's sudden reappearance without proper preparation for Jordan constitutes emotional harm to the child. The recording of today's visit supports that. Jordan was clearly uncomfortable and distressed. Maya remembered Jordan's face during those 20 minutes with David, confused, withdrawn, clutching his sketch pad like armor. The man he'd been forced to call Daddy was a stranger who smelled wrong, sounded wrong, felt wrong in every way that mattered to a child's heart. "There's something else," Nathaniel said, ending his call and turning to face them. "My head of security ran David's rental car plates. The car was paid for by a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. Same shell company that's been paying his legal fees." Maya felt cold understanding wash over her. "Someone's been planning this for months." "Longer than that," Nathaniel said grimly. "The company was established 8 months ago, right around the time David got clean and started his custody research. This isn't opportunistic. This is a coordinated attack." "But who?" Maya asked, though part of her already suspected the answer. "Who would spend that kind of money to destroy our lives?" Nathaniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression hardened into something Maya had never seen before. Cold, dangerous, absolutely certain. "Marcus Devlin," he said simply. Patterson looked up sharply. "Your former business partner?" Former being the operative word. Nathaniel's voice was steel. "Marcus has been systematically destroying competitors for 5 years, ever since our merger fell through. I cost him everything he'd built, his company, his reputation, his fiancée. Apparently, he's decided to return the favor." Maya stared at him. "He's using David to get to you? Using Jordan as a weapon in some business feud?" "That's exactly what he's doing." Nathaniel stood and began pacing, his mind clearly working through implications and strategies. "Marcus doesn't care about David or Jordan or your family. You're all just pieces on a chessboard he's using to checkmate me." The realization hit Maya like a physical blow. Her son, her beautiful, innocent, trusting son, was being traumatized by a custody battle designed not to reunite him with his father, but to punish Nathaniel for something that had nothing to do with their family. "That bastard," she whispered. "He's about to learn what happens when he miscalculates," Nathaniel said, pulling out his phone again. "Sarah, it's Nathaniel. I need you to conference in Tom Mitchell and Rebecca Chun. Full executive committee meeting in 1 hour." Maya watched him mobilize resources, coordinate strategies, prepare for a war that Marcus Devlin had started but apparently never expected to fight. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Marcus wants to play games with my family? Fine. But he's about to discover that I'm much better at this game than he remembers." The next few hours passed in a blur of conference calls, document reviews, and strategic planning that made Maya's head spin. Nathaniel's team worked with the focused intensity of people who'd done this before, uncovering connections and financial trails with surgical precision. By dawn, they had enough evidence to destroy Marcus Devlin's life 10 times over. Shell companies in 3 countries, all funneling money to David's legal team, reported Nathaniel's head investigator, a woman named Chun who looked like she could dismantle governments before breakfast. Plus payments for surveillance equipment, rental cars, and a very expensive private investigator who's been watching Maya and Jordan for 2 months. Maya felt sick. 2 months? He's been watching Jordan for 2 months? Richardson was good, Chun continued, but not good enough to cover his tracks from someone with my resources. "I have photographs of him photographing you, GPS data from his vehicle, financial records showing payments from Marcus's accounts." "That's stalking," Patterson said, making notes rapidly. "Stalking and child endangerment. This changes everything about the custody case." "What about David?" Maya asked. "Does he know he's being used?" "Unclear," Chin replied. "The payments to him suggest he knows something, but he might believe Marcus is just a concerned benefactor helping him reunite with his son." Nathaniel, who'd been quiet during the briefing, suddenly looked up with an expression that made everyone in the room go still. "Conference call," he said. "David, Marcus, and me. Right now." Patterson shook her head. "That's not advisable. It's necessary." Nathaniel's voice brooked no argument. "Marcus thinks he's playing chess with the man I was 5 years ago. He needs to meet the man I've become." Maya watched Nathaniel dial a number she didn't recognize, his movements calm and controlled despite the storm building in his gray eyes. "Marcus," he said when the call connected. "It's time we talked." "Nathaniel, what a pleasant surprise. Though I suppose it's not really surprising, given recent events." Marcus's voice came through the speaker with the smooth confidence of someone who believed he was winning. Maya felt her hands clench into fists at the casual cruelty in his tone. "David's there with you, isn't he?" Nathaniel asked conversationally. "David? I'm sure I don't know what you mean." "Conference him in, Marcus. All three of us should be part of this conversation." There was a pause, then the sound of another line connecting. "Nathaniel?" David's voice was confused, slightly panicked. "How did you get this number?" "Hello, David. Enjoying your new legal representation?" Those are expensive lawyers for a construction worker living in a weekly motel. Maya watched Nathaniel work, his voice calm and conversational while he dismantled Marcus's entire operation with surgical precision. "I don't know what you're talking about," David said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Shell companies, David. Cayman Islands accounts. Surveillance operations targeting a 9-year-old boy. Did you really think I wouldn't figure out who was bankrolling your sudden interest in fatherhood?" "Marcus, what is he talking about?" David's voice was rising now, panic overtaking confusion. "Marcus hasn't been entirely honest with you, David. This isn't about reuniting you with Jordan. This is about using your son as a weapon to hurt me." Maya heard the moment David understood. The sharp intake of breath, the silence that stretched too long, the realization that he'd been a pawn in someone else's game. "Is that true?" David asked, his voice small. Marcus's laughter was cold. "David, you're not exactly in a position to be choosy about your benefactors. You wanted your son back. I made it possible. Does it really matter why?" "You're using him," David said, understanding dawning. "You're using Jordan to hurt Nathaniel." "I'm using everyone to get what I want," Marcus replied without shame. "Nathaniel cost me everything 5 years ago. Now it's his turn to lose something that matters." Maya felt tears of rage burn behind her eyes. Jordan, her brave, beautiful, trusting son, reduced to a chess piece in Marcus Devlin's game of revenge. But Nathaniel wasn't finished. "Here's what's going to happen, Marcus," he said, his voice taking on the kind of authority that moved markets and toppled governments. "You're going to withdraw all financial support from David's custody case. You're going to recall your investigators. You're going to disappear from our lives completely. And why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'm going to destroy you. Not just financially, though I can and will do that. I'm going to destroy your reputation, your remaining business interests, your social standing, your freedom. I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man uses a disabled child as a weapon in a business dispute." Marcus's confidence faltered slightly. "You can't prove." "I can prove everything. Financial records, surveillance footage, recorded conversations." "Chun, send Marcus the summary file." Maya watched as Nathaniel's investigator typed rapidly, her fingers moving across the keyboard with deadly efficiency. "Check your email, Marcus," Nathaniel said calmly. The silence stretched for almost a minute before Marcus spoke again, his voice stripped of its earlier arrogance. "This is illegally obtained. Nothing illegal about financial records from your own accounts, Marcus. Nothing illegal about GPS data for vehicles you paid for. Nothing illegal about photographing someone who's been photographing children." David's voice cut through the tension. "I'm out." "David," Marcus started. "I said I'm out." David's voice cracked with emotion. "I wanted to see my son, not destroy his life. Whatever you two have between you, leave Jordan out of it." Maya felt something crack open in her chest. Not forgiveness. David had done too much damage for that. But recognition that somewhere underneath the addiction and abandonment and weakness, there might still be a father who genuinely cared about his child's well-being. "It's too late for cold feet, David," Marcus said smoothly. "You've already filed the custody petition. You're already committed. Then I'll withdraw it." "With what lawyer?" "I'm paying your legal fees, remember?" Maya watched Nathaniel smile, the cold, predatory expression she'd seen in the school parking lot. "David," Nathaniel said quietly, "would you like new representation? Someone who works for your interests instead of Marcus's." "You do that? After everything?" Nathaniel looked at Maya, and she saw her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. This wasn't about David deserving help. This was about Jordan deserving a father who wouldn't be Marcus Devlin's puppet. "I'd do that," Nathaniel said. On one condition. What condition? You get clean. Really clean. You stay clean. You build a relationship with Jordan slowly, appropriately, with respect for what he's been through and what he needs. And you never, ever let anyone use him as a weapon again. Maya held her breath, waiting for David's answer, knowing that her son's future hung in the balance of a conversation between three men who'd all failed him in different ways. Deal, David said finally. Marcus, lose my number. Nathaniel, thank you. Maya, I'm sorry. For all of it. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I am. The line went dead as David disconnected. This isn't over, Marcus said, his voice tight with rage. Yes, it is, Nathaniel replied calmly. Because if you come near my family again, if you so much as drive past their neighborhood, I will end you. Completely. Permanently. Do we understand each other? Marcus disconnected without answering. In the sudden silence of the conference room, Maya felt the weight of 3 years of fear and struggle finally lifting from her shoulders. Not completely. There would still be legal battles, still be conversations with Jordan about his father, still be the long process of healing from trauma. But the immediate threat was over. The war Marcus had started was finished before he'd realized it had begun. Nathaniel sank into his chair, suddenly looking exhausted. Is it really over? Maya asked quietly. It's over, he confirmed. Marcus won't risk exposure of what he's done. David's custody case will be withdrawn by end of business today. Jordan is safe. Maya looked across the room at her son, still sleeping peacefully on the leather couch, completely unaware that his future had just been secured by a man who'd chosen to fight for him without being asked. Thank you, she said, but the words felt completely insufficient. Don't thank me, Nathaniel said, standing and moving toward her. Thank you. For what? For trusting me to help. For letting me be part of this. For giving me the chance to protect something that matters. Maya stood too, and suddenly they were inches apart. The weight of the last 24 hours, the fear and anger and relief, creating a charged atmosphere between them. Maya, Nathaniel said quietly. Yeah. When this is all settled, when the legal mess is cleaned up and Jordan's had time to process everything. Yeah, I want to have that conversation. The one about what we're building together. About whether you're ready to stop being afraid that I'm going to disappear. Maya looked into his gray eyes and saw her future reflected there. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real and honest and worth fighting for. I'm ready now, she said. And for the first time in 3 years, Maya Davis believed in happy endings. Have you ever discovered someone was pulling strings behind your problems? How did it feel to learn the truth? And what did you do when you found out who was really responsible for trying to tear down what you were building? That is date. Asterisk, and what is he thinking? And poor thing, she has no idea what she's walked into. But the voice that stopped her cold came from behind, cutting through the judgment like a blade through silk. Maya. She turned, and time did something impossible. It slowed down and sped up all at once. Nathaniel Cross stood beside a corner table, and he wasn't looking at her with pity or disappointment or confusion. He was looking at her like she was exactly who he'd been waiting for. 6 feet tall, with dark hair that probably cost more to cut than Maya spent on groceries in a month, wearing a navy suit that fit him like it had been sewn directly onto his body. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch, gray like storm clouds, focused entirely on her face like nothing else in the room existed. You came, he said, and the relief in his voice was so genuine it made her chest tight. I'm sorry I'm late, Maya started, the apology tumbling out before she could stop it. Jordan had physical therapy, and it ran over, and then traffic was... Don't apologize. He stepped closer, and Maya caught a hint of his cologne, something clean and expensive that made her think of ocean breezes and possibilities. You're here. That's what matters. That's when he did something that made every person in that restaurant lean forward in their chairs, something that would be talked about in Atlanta's social circles for months to come. He looked down at Jordan, who was staring up at this tall stranger with curious eyes, and smiled, not the careful, polite smile adults usually gave children, especially children in wheelchairs. This was real, warm, like Jordan was the most interesting person he'd met all day. "You must be Jordan," Nathaniel said, crouching down so they were at eye level. "I've been looking forward to meeting you." Jordan glanced at his mother, then back at Nathaniel. "Mom said you're really important. Not as important as you." Nathaniel's voice was serious, man to man. "Your mom tells me you're an artist." Jordan's face lit up. "I draw spaceships and dragons. Sometimes space dragons." "Space dragons?" Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. "That sounds dangerous." "They're friendly space dragons," Jordan explained with the patience of someone who'd had to clarify this point many times. "They help people." Maya watched this exchange with something twisting in her chest. Hope mixed with fear, wonder tangled up with disbelief. Men didn't usually stick around long enough to have conversations with Jordan. They saw the wheelchair, made their excuses, and vanished like smoke. But Nathaniel was still crouched there, still listening like Jordan's words were the most important thing he'd heard all week. "I think I'd like to meet one of these space dragons someday," Nathaniel said. "Think you could draw one for me?" Before Jordan could answer, the hostess cleared her throat. "Your table is ready, Mr. Cross." Nathaniel stood, but instead of moving toward the table, he did something that made Maya's heart skip. He reached over and pulled out a third chair. "I hope you don't mind," he said to Maya, his eyes holding hers. "But I was thinking Jordan might want to sit with us. That is, if he wants to." The restaurant was so quiet Maya could hear her own pulse. This wasn't how these things went. Rich men didn't invite children with disabilities to dinner at places like this. They didn't crouch down and have serious conversations about space dragons. They didn't look at single mothers like they were gifts instead of complications. Maya opened her mouth to say something, maybe to give him an out, maybe to apologize again, maybe to ask if he was sure, but before she could speak, Jordan wheels his chair forward. "Can I sit next to you?" Jordan asked Nathaniel. "Mom says I have good table manners." Nathaniel's smile could have powered the city. "I'd be honored." As they settled into their seats, Jordan between Maya and Nathaniel like he belonged there, like this was the most natural arrangement in the world, Maya felt the weight of every stare in the restaurant. But for the first time since walking through those doors, she didn't care. Because Nathaniel wasn't looking at anyone else. His attention was split between her and Jordan, like they were the only people who mattered. Like they were exactly what he'd ordered when he'd agreed to this blind date. The waitress appeared, her smile bright and professional. "Good evening. Can I start you off with some appetizers?" "Actually," Nathaniel said, opening his menu. "Jordan, what do you think? Should we start with something good?" And that's when Maya realized this wasn't just dinner. This was something she'd never experienced before, something she'd stopped believing existed. This was a man seeing her whole truth, her son, her struggles, her life, and choosing to stay. The question that terrified her was simple. What did he want in return? Have you ever walked into a room knowing everyone was watching? Have you ever felt judged before anyone knew your story? The problem of assumptions can destroy connections before they even begin. What happened next would redefine everything they thought they knew about love. Hit that like button if you've ever felt out of place, but found someone who made you feel like you belonged exactly where you were. A desperate man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous enemy of all, especially when he targets the innocent. Marcus Devlin sat in his Manhattan office at 3 a.m., surrounded by empty whiskey bottles and the smoking remains of his empire. Nathaniel's files were spread across his desk, financial records that would destroy him, surveillance footage that would send him to prison, recorded conversations that would ruin him socially and professionally. But Marcus had spent 5 years planning his revenge, and he wasn't going down without taking something precious from Nathaniel Cross. His phone buzzed with a text from his remaining operative. Target acquired. School pickup in 2 hours. Confirming final instructions? Marcus smiled, the expression cold and desperate. If he couldn't destroy Nathaniel through legal battles and custody manipulation, he'd use a more direct approach. Jordan Davis was about to become the ultimate bargaining chip. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, Maya was experiencing something she'd forgotten existed: normalcy. Jordan sat at the breakfast table, humming while he ate cereal, his art supplies scattered around him as he worked on a new drawing. The custody case had been dismissed 3 days ago, David's lawyer officially withdrawing all claims in a filing that cited changed circumstances and the child's best interests. "What are you drawing today, baby?" Maya asked, refilling his orange juice. "It's a surprise," Jordan said with a kind of secretive smile that meant he was planning something special. "But it's for Mr. Nathaniel, for when he comes over tonight." Maya felt warmth bloom in her chest. Nathaniel had been coming over every night since the crisis ended, not because he felt obligated, but because their small apartment had become the place he most wanted to be. Last night, he'd fallen asleep on the couch with Jordan curled against his side, both of them exhausted from a fierce battle over a board game Jordan had ultimately won. "Speaking of Mr. Nathaniel," Maya said, sitting beside her son, "how would you feel if he was around more often? Like a lot more often?" Jordan looked up from his drawing, orange juice mustache, making him look even younger than his 9 years. "You mean like every day?" "Maybe. Would that be okay with you?" Jordan's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Are you going to marry him?" Maya felt her cheeks burn. "We haven't talked about marriage specifically, but you love him." It wasn't a question. Jordan had the uncanny ability most children possess to see straight through adult complications to the heart of things. "Yeah," Maya said quietly. "I love him, and he loves us. I can tell because he listens to my stories without looking at his phone, and he remembers things I tell him, and he bought special art supplies just for me to keep at his office." Maya's throat tightened. When had Jordan learned to measure love by attention, by consistency, by the small acts of care that prove someone was truly present? "So if you got married," Jordan continued with 9-year-old logic, "he'd be like my dad. My real dad, not the one who went away." Before Maya could respond, her phone rang. "Jordan's school. Ms. Davis? This is Mrs. Rodriguez. I'm calling because Jordan isn't in his first period class. Did he have an appointment this morning?" Maya's blood went cold. "He's not there. We show him as absent. Wasn't he on the bus?" Maya looked at Jordan, still sitting at their breakfast table, still humming over his art project, completely safe in their kitchen. "He's here with me," Maya said, confusion replacing panic. "He's sick today. I meant to call earlier." The lie came automatically, some instinct telling her not to reveal Jordan's actual location until she understood what was happening. "Oh, I apologize for the confusion. Feel better soon, Jordan." Maya hung up, her mind racing. Someone had expected Jordan to be at school this morning. Someone had been watching his schedule closely enough to know exactly when and where to find him. "Mom." Jordan looked up, sensing her tension. "Is everything okay?" Before Maya could answer, her phone rang again. Unknown number. "Maya Davis?" "Yes. This is Detective Williams, Atlanta PD. We need you to bring Jordan to the station immediately. We have credible intelligence about a threat to his safety." Maya's hands started shaking. "What kind of threat?" "Marcus Devlin hired someone to abduct your son from school this morning. We intercepted communications about an hour ago. Jordan needs to be in protective custody until we can locate and arrest the suspect." Maya sank into a chair, the weight of realization crushing her chest. Marcus hadn't accepted defeat. He'd escalated to the unthinkable, targeting a child directly. "We're on our way," she managed. "Mom, what's wrong?" Jordan's voice was small, scared by whatever he saw in her face. Maya knelt beside his wheelchair, taking his hands in hers, trying to project calm she didn't feel. "Remember when I told you about stranger danger? About how sometimes adults make bad choices and kids have to be extra careful?" Jordan nodded solemnly. "Well, there's a man who's upset with Mr. Nathaniel about business things, and he might try to use you to hurt Mr. Nathaniel's feelings. So we're going to go talk to some police officers who are going to make sure you stay safe." "Like bodyguards?" "Exactly like bodyguards." As Maya packed Jordan's emergency bag, something she learned to keep ready during their hardest years, she called Nathaniel. He answered on the first ring. "Marcus hired someone to kidnap Jordan," she said without preamble. The silence on the other end was so complete Maya thought the call had dropped. "Nathaniel, where are you?" His voice was deadly calm. "Home. Police want us at the station for protective custody. I'm 10 minutes away. Don't leave until I get there." "Nathaniel." "Maya, listen to me. Marcus is desperate. which makes him unpredictable. I'm not letting you handle this alone. 9 minutes later, Nathaniel's car pulled into their apartment complex parking lot. Maya watched from the window as he got out, his movements controlled but urgent, his phone pressed to his ear as he coordinated with people whose names she didn't recognize. He was still on the phone when he reached their door, but the moment he saw Jordan, his expression softened. "Hey, buddy," he said, crouching beside Jordan's wheelchair. "I hear you're going to meet some real detectives today. Pretty cool, right?" Jordan's anxiety visibly decreased. "Will they have badges?" "Definitely badges. Maybe even police cars with sirens." As they drove to the station, Nathaniel's phone rang constantly. Maya listened to him coordinate security details, legal strategies, and what sounded like a manhunt for Marcus Devlin with the kind of efficiency that reminded her he controlled a business empire worth billions. "Is he in custody?" Nathaniel asked someone. "What do you mean you can't locate him?" Maya felt ice form in her stomach. "Marcus is missing? Left his office yesterday afternoon. Building security shows him leaving with 2 suitcases and a laptop bag." Nathaniel's jaw was tight. He's running, but he's not done yet. At the police station, Detective Williams turned out to be a kind woman in her 40s who immediately understood that Jordan's comfort was as important as his safety. She showed him the precinct, let him sit in a police car, introduced him to officers who treated him like a celebrity rather than a victim. "The suspect we arrested this morning was hired to grab Jordan during school pickup," Williams explained to Maya and Nathaniel in her office. "Simple kidnapping for ransom, except Marcus wasn't planning to ask for money." "What was he planning to ask for?" Maya already knew the answer, but she needed to hear it confirmed. "Total destruction of Cross Industries. Public admission of wrongdoing in their failed merger 5 years ago. Financial compensation that would have bankrupted your company, Mr. Cross." Nathaniel's hands were clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. Using a 9-year-old boy as leverage. The suspect says Marcus promised him $1 million to grab the kid and hold him until you agree to terms. Says Marcus told him the boy wouldn't be hurt, just scared enough to make you cooperate. Maya felt sick. Where's Marcus now? Unknown. But here's what we do know. He's desperate, he's lost most of his resources, and he's got nothing left to lose. That makes him extremely dangerous. "What do you need from us?" Nathaniel asked. "Stay somewhere secure until we find him. Jordan shouldn't return to school or follow any regular routines until Marcus is in custody." As they left the police station, Jordan between them like he'd always belonged there, Maya felt this strange combination of terror and gratitude that had become familiar over the last few weeks. Terror because someone had tried to steal her son. Gratitude because she wasn't facing it alone. "Where will we go?" she asked Nathaniel as they reached the parking garage. "My house," he said without hesitation. "Security system, gated community, private guards if necessary. Marcus won't get within a mile of you." Jordan perked up from his wheelchair. "Your house? The one with the big windows and the pool?" "That's the one. Think you'd like to stay there for a few days? Can I bring my art stuff?" "Jordan," Nathaniel said seriously, "you can bring anything that makes you feel safe." As they drove toward Nathaniel's house, Maya watched Atlanta pass outside the window and realized something profound had shifted in the last few hours. Not just their location or their security arrangements, but something deeper. For 3 years, Maya had been the only adult responsible for keeping Jordan safe. Every decision, every crisis, every moment of fear had been hers alone to handle. But now, watching Nathaniel coordinate their protection like Jordan's safety was as important as his own life. Maya understood that her family had grown in ways that went beyond legal definitions or official arrangements. Jordan was still her son, but he was also under Nathaniel's protection now, claimed and defended with the kind of fierce determination that made Marcus Devlin's revenge seem not just cruel, but impossible. Some families are born. Others are forged in crisis, built through choices that prove love is stronger than fear, trust deeper than doubt. As they pulled through the gates of Nathaniel's estate, Jordan pressed his face to the window in amazement while Maya felt something she'd thought was lost forever. Absolute certainty that no matter what storm was coming, they would weather it together. Marcus Devlin could run, could hide, could make all the desperate threats he wanted. But he'd already lost the only battle that mattered. He'd lost the war for the heart of a family that had chosen each other through every test that tried to tear them apart. What would you do to protect someone you love? How far would you go when someone threatens the most innocent member of your family? Share your thoughts on love as the ultimate protection. Sometimes the most beautiful thing about surviving a storm is discovering who stands with you in the aftermath. Nathaniel's house felt like stepping into a magazine spread. Soaring ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over manicured gardens, furniture that probably cost more than Maya had made in the last 2 years combined. But what struck her most wasn't the luxury. It was how quickly it began to feel like home. Jordan had claimed the guest room with the best view of the pool, his art supplies spread across a desk that was bigger than Maya's entire kitchen table. For 3 days now, he'd been drawing obsessively. Not his usual space dragons and rocket ships, but scenes from their life. Maya cooking breakfast, Nathaniel helping with homework. The three of them watching movies on the enormous couch in the living room. He's processing Dr. Sarah Chun, the child psychologist Nathaniel had quietly arranged, explained to Maya and Nathaniel. Children work through trauma differently than adults. Jordan's way of making sense of everything that happened is to document the good moments, to create visual proof that he's safe now. They were sitting in Nathaniel's office while Jordan had his session with Dr. Chun in the living room, a session that looked more like playtime, with drawing and storytelling and gentle questions that helped Jordan express feelings he didn't have words for yet. What about the nightmares? Maya asked. Jordan had woken up crying for the last 2 nights, dreams about being taken away from her, about bad men who wanted to hurt the people he loved. Normal response to feeling threatened, Dr. Chun assured her. The fact that he's comfortable enough in this environment to have nightmares is actually good news. He feels safe enough to let his guard down and process the fear. Maya looked through the office window to where Jordan was showing Dr. Chun his latest drawing. Even from a distance, she could see him smiling, engaged, trusting this new adult who'd entered his world with patience and genuine interest. How long before he feels normal again? Nathaniel asked, and Maya heard the guilt in his voice, the weight he was carrying for bringing Marcus Devlin's violence into their lives. Children are remarkably resilient, Dr. Chun replied. With consistent safety, loving support, and time to process, Jordan will not just recover from this. He'll be stronger for having survived it with people who protected him. After Dr. Chun left, Maya found Nathaniel standing on the terrace overlooking the pool, where Jordan was working on water therapy with a physical therapist, another of Nathaniel's quietly arranged additions to their daily routine. You're blaming yourself, Maya said, moving to stand beside him. Shouldn't I? Marcus targeted Jordan because of me, because I fell in love with you and couldn't hide it well enough. Maya turned to study his profile, the strong jaw, the gray eyes that had become her anchor through every storm, the mouth that had spoken more kindness to her son in 2 months than David had managed in 6 years. Can I tell you something? Nathaniel looked at her, and Maya saw the pain there, the responsibility he was shouldering for Marcus's choices. The night Jordan was injured, the car accident, we were coming home from visiting David's parents. Jordan was upset because David had promised to come, but never showed up. Again, I was angry, distracted, thinking about how to explain to a 6-year-old why his father kept disappointing him. Maya's voice caught, but she pushed through the old guilt, the secret she'd never shared with anyone. I ran the red light. I was so focused on my anger at David that I didn't see it change. The truck that hit us had the right of way. Jordan lost the use of his legs because I was too distracted by my ex-husband's failures to pay attention to the road. Nathaniel went very still beside her. Maya, for 3 years, I've carried the guilt of causing my son's disability. I've worked 2 jobs, not just to pay his medical bills, but to punish myself for the moment of inattention that changed his life forever. That was an accident, was it? Or was it the inevitable result of letting David's chaos consume my attention when I should have been focused on keeping Jordan safe? Maya looked down at her son in the pool, laughing as the therapist helped him strengthen his core muscles, completely unaware of the conversation happening above him. Marcus didn't target Jordan because you fell in love with us. He targeted Jordan because he's a sociopath who saw a vulnerable child and decided to use him as a weapon. That's not your fault any more than the accident was mine." Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. "Do you really believe that?" he asked finally. "I'm learning to. Dr. Chun says guilt is just fear wearing a disguise. Fear that we don't deserve the good things that come after the bad things. Fear that happiness is temporary and trauma is permanent. What do you think?" Maya watched Jordan attempt a backstroke with the therapist's help, his face bright with concentration and joy. "I think trauma taught me to be strong, but love is teaching me to be happy. And maybe it's time I chose happiness." That evening, after Jordan had gone to bed with a stack of new books and the promise that Nathaniel would check on him before sleeping, Maya found herself alone with a man who'd become the center of her world in ways that still scared and thrilled her. They were in his kitchen, a space that could have accommodated 3 apartments like Maya's, but somehow felt intimate when it was just the two of them, sharing wine and the comfortable silence of people who'd been through war together. "Maya," Nathaniel said suddenly, setting down his glass. She looked up from the financial documents they'd been reviewing. Paperwork to formalize Jordan's medical trust, legal arrangements that ensured her son's care would never depend on anyone's continued affection or presence. "There's something I need to say." The seriousness in his tone made Maya's pulse quicken. "Okay, these last few weeks, watching you protect Jordan, watching you fight for him, watching you trust me to help." Nathaniel moved around the kitchen island until he was standing directly in front of her. "I've fallen in love with both of you. Not the idea of a family, not the feeling of being needed, but specifically you and specifically Jordan." Maya's breath caught. "I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. I know that loving someone with a child means accepting that you'll never be the only priority, and I don't want to be. Jordan comes first, as he should, as I want him to." Nathaniel reached out and cupped Maya's face in his hands, his thumbs tracing along her cheekbones. "But I need you to know that this isn't temporary for me. This isn't charity or novelty or some crisis-induced attachment that will fade when life gets normal again." "How can you be sure?" Maya asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Because normal life with you is better than the most exciting life I had without you. Because Jordan makes me want to be the kind of man who deserves to be called dad. Because when I imagine my future now, you're both in every single day of it." Maya felt tears start, but for once they weren't tears of fear or overwhelm or the desperate gratitude that had characterized so much of her relationship with kindness. These were tears of recognition, of coming home to a place she'd never been, but had always been searching for. "I love you too," she said, the words easier than they'd ever been with anyone else. "Both of us love you. Jordan asked me yesterday if you were going to be his real dad, and I realized I want that answer to be yes." Nathaniel's smile was soft, wondering, touched with the same amazement Maya felt at finding something she'd stopped believing existed. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, formal and gentle even now. "Please." The kiss was different from a few they'd shared before, not desperate or stolen or interrupted by crisis. This was the kiss of 2 people who'd chosen each other deliberately, completely, with full knowledge of what they were promising. When they broke apart, Maya was breathless, warm, filled with a hunger that had nothing to do with desperation and everything to do with joy. "Jordan's asleep," she said, the words loaded with invitation. "Maya, are you sure? After everything that's happened?" "I'm sure because of everything that's happened. Because you've seen me at my worst and my most scared and you're still here. Because you've held my son while he cried and made him laugh when he needed it most. Because I trust you with the most precious thing in my world." Maya stepped closer, eliminating the space between them, letting him feel the warmth of her body against his. "Make love to me, Nathaniel. Not because I need comfort or because we survived something terrible, but because I choose you. Because we choose each other." The hunger in his eyes matched her own, but still he hesitated. "Are you certain this isn't too fast? Too much pressure after?" Maya silenced him with a kiss that left no room for doubt, her body pressed against his, her hands fisted in his shirt, her heart open and certain and ready for whatever came next. "The only pressure I feel," she said against his mouth, "is the pressure to stop wasting time on fear when I could be celebrating love instead." That night, in Nathaniel's bedroom with moonlight streaming through windows that overlooked the garden where Jordan had played that afternoon, Maya discovered what it meant to make love without reservation, without the shadow of impermanence, without the guard she kept around her heart for so long. Nathaniel worshipped her body like it was sacred, touched her like she was precious, loved her like she was exactly what he'd been waiting for all his life. And Maya gave herself completely, not because she needed rescue, but because she'd found partnership, not because she was desperate, but because she was joyful. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow back to normal, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced since before Jordan's accident: complete peace. "What are you thinking?" Nathaniel asked, his fingers combing gently through her hair. "I'm thinking," Maya said, tracing patterns on his chest, "that Marcus Devlin tried to destroy us and ended up proving that we're indestructible." "How so?" "He threw everything he had at us: legal battles, custody fights, attempted kidnapping, threats, manipulation. And we're still here. We're still choosing each other. If we can survive Marcus Devlin's revenge, we can survive anything." Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, his hands stilling in her hair. "Maya, yeah, marry me." The words hung in the air between them, simple and direct and completely inevitable. Maya lifted her head to look at him, seeing her own certainty reflected in his gray eyes. "Are you proposing?" "I'm asking if you think Jordan would be okay with having me around permanently. Officially, with the legal right to protect him and the official responsibility to love him forever." Maya's throat tightened with emotion. "I think Jordan would be thrilled. But what about you? Are you ready to be an instant father to a 9-year-old with special needs and a complicated history?" "Maya," Nathaniel said, pulling her up until she was lying fully on top of him, her face inches from his, "I've been ready since the night he showed me his space dragon drawings and asked if I thought they were good enough to hang on my refrigerator. We don't have to rush. We're not rushing. We're recognizing what's already true. You and Jordan are my family. The only question is whether you want to make it legal." Maya studied his face in the moonlight, this man who'd walked into her life during the most ordinary dinner and somehow become the answer to prayers she'd been afraid to pray. "Ask me again," she said. "Maya Davis, will you marry me? Will you let me be Jordan's father? Will you build a life with me where love wins and families choose each other and nobody has to face anything alone ever again?" "Yes," Maya said, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted like forever. Yes to all of it. Outside, Atlantis slept peacefully under a sky full of stars. Somewhere in the city, police continued searching for Marcus Devlin, but his power to hurt them was already broken. Inside Nathaniel's house, their house now, Maya realized, a new family slept safely, bound not by biology or convenience or desperation, but by the strongest force in the universe. Love that chooses to stay even when staying is hard. Love that protects without smothering. Love that sees the whole truth of a person and says yes anyway. In his room down the hall, Jordan slept dreamlessly for the first time in weeks, his latest drawing propped on his nightstand. A space dragon with silver scales and kind eyes, wings spread wide in protection over a family of 3 standing beneath. Finally, his protective dragon had found the family worth guarding. How do you rebuild after someone tries to destroy what you built? What does healing look like when you're not doing it alone? Share your thoughts on love as the foundation that makes everything else possible. She learned to say yes to help, yes to love, and yes to hope, but this yes would change everything. The Atlanta Botanical Garden looked different in October. Autumn colors painting the trees in shades of gold and crimson, the air crisp with the promise of change. Maya pushed Jordan's wheelchair along the same paths they'd walked 2 months ago during their first magical evening together. But everything felt transformed. Not just the season, but them. The way Nathaniel's hand fit naturally in hers. The way Jordan chattered constantly to both of them, treating Nathaniel like the father he'd always wanted and never expected to have. The way fear had been replaced by anticipation, uncertainty by joy. "Where are we going exactly?" Maya asked as Nathaniel led them toward a section of the garden she didn't recognize. "You'll see," Jordan said conspiratorially, bouncing slightly in his wheelchair with excitement. Maya looked between them suspiciously. "You two have been planning something." "Maybe," Nathaniel said with the kind of innocent expression that fooled no one. They rounded a corner, and Maya's breath caught. The conservatory had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. Thousands of tiny white lights strung between the trees, rose petals scattered along the path, a small orchestra set up near the fountain playing music that seemed to make the entire space glow with magic. "Nathaniel, what?" "Mom," Jordan interrupted, wheeling himself to face her with the serious expression he wore when delivering important information. "Mr. Nathaniel wanted to ask you something special. But first, he asked me something." Maya's heart started racing as understanding dawned. "What did he ask you?" Jordan's face broke into a grin that could have powered the city. "He asked if it would be okay if he married you and became my dad. Like my real dad. Forever." Maya's eyes filled with tears as she looked from her son's radiant face to Nathaniel, who was already reaching into his jacket pocket. "And what did you tell him?" Maya asked, though she could already see the answer in Jordan's excitement. "I told him yes, obviously, but only if he promised to help me with my art contests and take me to see real rockets and never leave us, even when I'm being annoying." Maya laughed through her tears. "And what did he say?" "He said those were the easiest promises he'd ever make." Nathaniel stepped forward then, pulling out a ring box that looked tiny in his large hands. "Maya," he said, his voice carrying over the soft music, "6 months ago, I thought I knew what my life looked like. Successful company, nice house, predictable routine. I thought that was enough." He opened a ring box, revealing a diamond that caught the light from thousands of tiny bulbs and threw rainbows across the garden path. "Then I met a woman who taught me the difference between existing and living, who showed me what real strength looks like, what love actually means, what family truly is." Maya could barely breathe, awareness of the magnitude of this moment making everything sharp and clear and perfect. "I met a little boy who dreams of space dragons and draws pictures of hope, and asked me if I thought his art was good enough for a refrigerator. Who made me realize that being a father isn't about biology, it's about choice. Every day, choosing to show up, to listen, to protect, to love." Nathaniel looked at Jordan, including him in this moment that would define all their futures. "Jordan has already given me permission to ask you this question. But the answer has to come from your heart, Maya." He dropped to one knee beside Jordan's wheelchair, and Maya realized they'd planned this positioning. The two most important people in her world, together, asking her to make them officially family. "Maya Davis, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that some love stories don't end with, and they lived happily ever after? They begin with it." Maya looked down at this man who'd walked into her life during the most ordinary dinner and somehow become her everything. At her son, practically vibrating with excitement beside him, already secure in the knowledge that Nathaniel's love was permanent, reliable, real. Around them, the garden seemed to hold its breath. Even the orchestra had gone quiet, waiting for her answer. "Yes," Maya said, the word coming out as barely a whisper. "I can't hear you, Mom," Jordan called out with 9-year-old dramatic flair. Maya laughed, her voice growing stronger, more certain with each repetition. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I want you to be Jordan's father. Yes to all of it." The ring slid onto her finger like it had been made for her hand. Like this moment had been inevitable from the second Nathaniel had pulled out that third chair at dinner 6 months ago. As Nathaniel stood and pulled her into his arms, as Jordan cheered loudly enough to startle the butterflies in the conservatory, as the orchestra began playing again and garden visitors stopped to watch their celebration with knowing smiles, Maya felt the final piece of her carefully guarded heart click into place. This wasn't just an engagement. This was the moment when 3 separate people officially became one family, bound not by circumstance or convenience, but by choice. "Group hug," Jordan demanded, and suddenly Maya was sandwiched between the two people who'd become her entire world, laughing and crying and feeling more complete than she'd ever imagined possible. "When's the wedding?" Jordan asked as they finally separated. "Can I be the best man? Can we have space dragon decorations? Can we—" "Jordan," Nathaniel interrupted gently, "one thing at a time. But yes, you can absolutely be the best man. Really, really. I can't imagine getting married without my best man beside me." Maya watched this exchange between the two people she loved most, seeing how naturally they'd fallen into father-son rhythms, how completely Jordan trusted Nathaniel's promises, how thoroughly Nathaniel had embraced his role as protector and guide. "There's one more surprise," Nathaniel said, pulling an envelope from his other jacket pocket. Jordan's eyes lit up. "What is it? Remember how I promised to take you to see real rockets?" Jordan nodded enthusiastically. "How would you feel about a family trip to Kennedy Space Center for our honeymoon? You, me, and your mom, exploring space museums and meeting real astronauts, and maybe even watching a launch." Jordan's response was so loud it probably registered on seismographs across Georgia. "Yes. Mom, can we? Please." Maya looked at Nathaniel over Jordan's head, seeing the man who'd understood that their honeymoon needed to include their son, who'd planned their first family vacation around a 9-year-old's dreams of space exploration. "I think that sounds perfect," she said. As they walked back through the garden, Jordan chattering excitedly about rockets and astronauts and wedding plans, Maya felt her phone buzz with a text. "Unknown number. Congratulations on your engagement. I saw the announcement in the society pages. You won, Maya. Enjoy your victory. M. Marcus Devlin." Still out there, still watching, but his message carried defeat instead of threat. He'd thrown everything he had at their happiness and failed. Now all he could do was acknowledge that love had proven stronger than revenge. Maya showed the text to Nathaniel, who read it and immediately deleted it. "He can't hurt us anymore," Nathaniel said simply. "How can you be sure?" "Because we're not the same people he tried to destroy. We're stronger now. We're family now. We're—" Nathaniel paused, searching for the right words. "We're indestructible," Maya finished, echoing her words from the night they'd first made love. Exactly. That evening, after Jordan had finally exhausted himself planning wedding details and space travel itineraries, Maya and Nathaniel sat on his terrace. Their terrace now? Watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "Are you sure about this?" Maya asked, turning the engagement ring on her finger, still adjusting to its weight and sparkle. Marriage to someone with a 9-year-old is different from dating someone with a 9-year-old. "Maya," Nathaniel said, pulling her closer until she was tucked against his side, "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Even when he's being impossible. Even when there are school projects and soccer games and parent-teacher conferences and all the chaos that comes with family life. Especially then." Nathaniel's voice was soft but absolutely certain. "I spent 35 years thinking success meant building something impressive. Now I know it means building something lasting. Something that matters more than profit margins or business deals or anything I could achieve alone." Maya looked through the window to where Jordan was already asleep, exhausted by excitement and dreams of space travel, and felt peace settle over her like a comfortable blanket. "When?" she asked. "When what? When do you want to get married?" "Jordan's going to ask about 1,000 times tomorrow." Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing patterns on her shoulder. "As soon as possible," he said finally. "I don't want to wait to make this official. I don't want to give anyone or anything the chance to change our minds or complicate our happiness." "Christmas," Maya suggested. "Jordan loves Christmas, and it would give us time to plan something beautiful." "Christmas it is. Our first Christmas as an official family." As Maya fell asleep in Nathaniel's arms that night, the engagement ring catching moonlight on her finger, she realized something profound had shifted in her understanding of the world. For 3 years, she believed that happy endings were for other people. People without complications, without disabilities, without messy histories that made love seem impossible. But happiness, she now understood, wasn't the absence of complications. It was the presence of someone who chose to love you, including your complications, who saw your struggles and said, "We'll figure it out together," who looked at your child and saw not a burden, but a blessing. Tomorrow, Marcus Devlin might still be out there somewhere, nursing his defeated rage. Tomorrow, there would still be doctor's appointments and therapy sessions and the thousand small challenges that came with raising a child with special needs. But tonight, Maya Davis was engaged to the love of her life, mother to a son who was thriving, part of a family that had chosen each other through every test that tried to tear them apart. Tomorrow could bring whatever challenges it wanted. They faced them together. What does true partnership look like to you? When you know someone sees your whole family as their family.